Chapter 209. Chapter 209, Alliance So What? Yi Shiwen said, I know that your sex head has announced that he will protect you, but considering my 8th Imperial brother's character, he will not give up so easily. The 9th prince further said, Actually, we have a common enemy. Enemy. The word just slipped out of his mouth as he continued to ponder. It seemed like in the research files of Yuan School, at least the information about the 9th prince was certainly missing. Yuan School certainly had an unpleasant impression of the 8th prince, and the reason was very simple, because the 8th prince was very ambitious. He basically wanted to control all of the 4 major sects on his fingertips. Even so, it doesn't seem like we have anything to cooperate on, or do you think you can stop your 8th Imperial brother? Yi Shiwen asked. It should be said that it's about mutual help and mutual cooperation. I know that you are a pro-disciple of Yuan School, and sooner and later, you're going to have a thriving future, and that is the basis of our cooperation. The 9th prince lightly said, apparently he was a very proud fellow, and usually didn't prefer paying much attention to ordinary people. You help me ascend the throne, and after I mount the throne, I will use my royal power to help you mount the position of Yuan School's head. The 9th prince indifferently said, but the way he said it was quite direct and straightforward. I am different from my 8th Imperial brother. I am not as ambitious as him, and neither do I dream of putting the complete control of Great Yu State into the hands of royal clan. The 9th prince said, it was not as if he was resentful against the 8th prince. It was just difficult for him to accept the 8th prince's ambition of dominating the 4 major sections. Even if the 8th prince is out of question, I can still choose from a lot of other princes. Yi Shiwen said, after all, he knew that there were about a dozen princes in the empire, not to forget the eldest prince, the 2nd prince, and the 4th prince. Now, the eldest imperial brother, the 2nd imperial brother, and the 4th imperial brother have formed an alliance with Chu Jinkai, a pro-disciple of your Yuan School. The 9th prince said, and, as far as the remaining imperial brothers are concerned, I assure you that none of them is stronger than me. I should be, by far, the most suitable partner for Brother Yi. The 9th prince confidently said, it's the right choice for both of us. Both of them held equivalent levels of potential. Yi Shiwen had recently emerged and was being compared to a legend like Qi Fifan, but he still had a very long way to go to become his rival. And the 9th prince also had tremendous potential, but he was still in his dormant period. However, he was still an ambitious dragon. Yi Shiwen, this 9th prince is not an ordinary guy. Yimo said, he's not much older than you, but his cultivation has already reached the 4th stage of Truth Realm, and I can see that he holds strong talent. I'm afraid I don't see much difference in his potential and that of the so-called 8th prince. After listening to the words of Yimo, Yi Shiwen considered for a moment. This 9th prince so confidently came to him, and that too not without reason, although it was certainly a complementary cooperation of the two. But Yi Shiwen didn't have the interest in the sect head's position, still he would certainly having some powerful connections, so in the end it was a good choice. Such being the case, I would respectfully do what you say, but always remember, deference is no substitute for obedience. Yi Shiwen spilled out a strange smile and said, Nt. Gongjing Bu Ru Songming. Deference is no substitute for obedience, idiom. To follow somebody's precepts is the sincerest form of respect. Suddenly, there was a look of pleasant surprise on the face of the 9th prince. The kind of shocked expression he had on his face right now was actually a rare sight. Finally, a big rock fell off the heart of the 9th prince. In fact, today he came to meet Yi Shiwen, but didn't have any grasp over the situation. In addition to that, Yi Shiwen might have opted to help other princes since he was relatively low-key when compared to his other imperial brothers. Not to forget, Yi Shiwen recently became the pro-disciple and was known as the next Qi Fifan of Yuan School, so there was no need for him to be in a hurry to make a decision. In comparison, Yi Shiwen was a greater figure than him, considering both status and popularity. That's why when Yi Shiwen nodded, he could not help but feel a big stone falling off his heart. So long as Brother Yi agrees, it's all good. Today, I will go back to the castle and make a request from Father Emperor so that Brother Yi gets transferred to my legion. The 9th prince suddenly said in a lofty manner, This will be my first time commanding troops in battle, and I can only finish the battle in one fell swoop in a majestic manner. Then only it will lay my position in the eyes of Father Emperor. You see, in this battle, we can only win. We don't have the luxury of losing. So, brother, you must also win in a grand way." Yi Shiwen nodded. It seemed like the ninth prince didn't intend to continue to stay dormant, but again, if he actually planned to stay dormant for some more time than at the time of choosing the emperor for the throne, he would have no chance against the four strongest princes. Now these princes needed opportunities to show their valiance and courage. They must succeed in a short time, just the way the eighth prince did it. And they only had one way left to do that. They must courageously march forward, destroying all the obstacles and enemies in their way, constantly winning and rising towards the final goal. Yi Shiwen nodded. Since he had already made the decision to help the ninth prince, he would certainly help to the very end. "Where is your legion going the day after tomorrow?" Yi Shiwen asked. "To the Haishui's lair in the East China Sea. That Haishui is really very audacious. He dared to join hands with the devil. When we reach there, we have been tasked to slaughter all of the deep-water black snakes. None of those beasts shall be left alive." The ninth prince said with an irrepressible excitement, which was quite understandable since he was going to be the leader of his own legion for the first time. And if he did not succeed, then this might end up being the last time. The power struggle for throne was a very nasty game. In fact, many princes did not get a chance to show their strength. Those who managed to show their potential would get only one chance to prove themselves. Otherwise, they would get eliminated. But Haishui's lair is the residing place of half-step legendary level demon beast. At my current level, I cannot deal with him. Yi Shiwen said since the Deepwater Black Serpent King had left a very deep impression on him last time. Rest assured, naturally the royal clan will take care of that beast. The ninth prince said as he really valued Yi Ziwen's life, considering he knew that Yi Shiwen was not yet a grown-up and had a limitless future. "That's no problem." Yi Shiwen nodded. To be continued. Chapter 210. Chapter 210, Destruction of Haishui's lair. The royal clan moved very quickly. There wasn't the so-called hauling or procrastination. The entire huge state apparatus began to move up, and in the face of such a thing, it seemed as if it was advancing to subvert the rule of this country. The mobilization speed of Yu Imperial clan went far beyond the imagination of Yi Shiwen. At this time, this was a display of the true strength of this legendary bureaucracy, which was driving hundreds of thousands into actions at the same time. Early in the morning, one after another, several teams finally began to reveal their fangs. They were advancing towards the respective city gates of the Imperial City in order to march out of the city. Hundreds of thousands of experts were marching together, which suddenly shocked the whole city. However, the citizens were not at all afraid. Due to the abrupt surfacing of Bai Majiao, there had been turmoil for several months, and everyone was aware of that. Although Bai Majiao had not dared to be dissolute in the imperial capital, but they truly did some serious damage to the Great Yu state. Yi Shiwen was flying at a very high altitude in the sky and watching how the combative armies were marching out of the imperial gates. He was now fully aware of the fact that Great Yu State contained astonishing strength, which was finally unveiled in front of his eyes. The fearful power of several legions was finally unleashed and fully emerged. The murderous aura swept off throughout the sky, and the clouds seemed to have been minced. One simply didn't stand a chance when facing such an army, unless he was a legendary level expert. Soon, Yi Ziwen's wait for his own team was over when he saw the special regiment of Imperial Armed Forces marching forward with the Great Tiger's flag fluttering on the forefront. The Imperial soldiers were mostly the experts of Xiantian realm, and the higher rank commanders were experts of Xiantian 6th stage or above. The particularity of Great Yu's royal clan was that they didn't have too many top players unlike other major sects, but they housed far too many experts of Xiantian realm, and the sheer number far surpassed any of the major sections. Yesterday, the ninth prince was clad in a royal dragon robe, but today he was wearing a military uniform, which was giving him a heroic aura. As usual, the old man in black clothes was following him and sticking close behind him. The old man's cultivation was only faintly discernible, and his skill seemed very profound. Ruo-in Ruo-shin. Faintly discernible, idiom. A huge fleet of battleships appeared on the ground, stationed about 10 li outside the imperial city wall. The imperial soldiers marched towards these battleships and boarded them. Dozens of warships soon took off together. These battleships were actually the divine tools. Their might was simply infinite and were completely different from the warships used by the Great Yu State during national campaigns and ordinary expeditions. Yi Shiwen also flew down and landed on a warship which was being led by the high-spirited Ninth Prince. "Brother Yi, this is the beginning of our great cause," the Ninth Prince said in a somewhat complacent manner. Yi Shiwen did not speak. However, a faint smile appeared on his face. One after another, battleships turned into dazzling streamers of light and flew far towards the horizon. In just half-day's time, these battleships reached the East China Sea and descended on the seawater. However, even in the sea, these battleships were scary fast and charging around violently. There literally was nothing to stop these ships, and the demon beasts that mistakenly came in their path were crushed miserably and simply turned into small bits of flesh and blood splatter. These warships are necessary because most of the Imperial soldiers are in Xiantian realm and cannot fly as fast as the truth-level experts. So, a fast mode of travel is required to reach the target area ASAP. Soon, they arrived in the waters around Haishui's lair. Begin extermination and clean up each and every living thing in this and the nearby areas. I want it completely cleaned up. Don't forget to wipe out all the demon beasts here. Not even a shrimp must be left alive. I want this place to turn into Haishui's graveyard. The Ninth Prince roared while he was brimming with killing intention. "As you command, my lord." The might of thousands of Imperial soldiers manifested rapidly. The demon beasts of Haishui's lair couldn't possibly be the match of an organized and trained army. Not to forget the Imperial army consisted of Xiantian-level soldiers and several truth-level commanders. Suddenly, the whole sea turned bloody and chaotic. One could hear the pitiful roars and screams of demon beasts, transmitting straight from the sea. After having swept clean the demon beasts on the sea level, the Imperial Corps proceeded to gradually dive into the sea. The soldiers were equipped with proper underwater equipments to enable breathing inside the sea, so that slaughtering demon beasts in the depths of the sea would be no problem at all. Only truth-level experts are able to breathe under the water. For Xiantian-level experts or below, these scuba equipments are necessary so that they don't drown. Yi Shiwen sighed with emotion and thought that the royal clan was filthy rich and to the extent that the other sects simply didn't stand a chance in front of its wealth. "Who dares to massacre my subjects?" A loud roar rang out from the depths of seabed, and about 10,000 feet long deep-water black snake king instantly jumped out of the seabed with its mouth open, which suddenly sucked in dozens of Imperial soldiers who were swallowed whole in one breath and were eaten raw. At this moment, the deep-water black snake king's great roar terribly shook everyone's eardrums. This one roar was equivalent to the sound produced by 1,000 big drums. One swing from his huge and powerful tail shook the entire sea. But Yi Shiwen clearly saw a massive wound on his tail, which once again cracked open, along with splashes of blood spreading in the seawater when he swung his tail. Apparently, this was an injury that he received during the previous fight, and it still hadn't healed. "Hey Shui, how dare you collaborate with those devils? Today, in the name of Imperial decree, I must exterminate you and all these evildoers." The Ninth Prince stepped forward and shouted to clear the way. "Today, this Haishui's lair will be destroyed, and it will be completely removed from the East China Sea. Kill!" The soldiers of Imperial Guard armed forces roared, and the murderous aura of the deadliest of soldiers immediately upset the sea water. It was really an incomparably fearful sight. At this time, there a hint of regret on the face of Deepwater Black Snake King. He had been thoroughly misled by Lu Hongwei, so the regret was much self-explanatory in this situation. "Evildoer, today is the day you die." At this time, the old man in black clothes instantly flew up, and a terrifying aura spread out in all directions. Despite having a skinny body, his presence was just like that of a mountain. The chi exploded out of his body and spread out in the surrounding radius of several thousand miles. Half-step legendary master. Yi Shiwen gawked for a moment, because he never expected that the skinny old man, who always followed around the ninth prince and never left his side, would turn out to be a half-step legendary expert. He finally understood the hidden meaning behind the ninth prince's words when he said that the royal clan would deal with the beast, so the ninth prince was secretly talking about the black-clothed old man. By quietly roping in a half-step legendary expert into his faction, it could be seen that the ninth prince was really aiming for the throne. He had secretly done no small preparation for this. "Who are you?" The deep-water black snake roared fiercely when he saw a half-step legendary expert standing in his way. If he was not injured, then dealing with a half-step legendary expert would have been no trouble for him. But right now, he was in a dire situation, and he could sense that he was facing a terrifying expert. "I am the one who is going to end your life," the black-clothed old man indifferently said. "You should know that the devil invasion is close. Do you want to go against the heaven's will?" The deep-water black snake exclaimed. "A lowly beast like you dares to teach me," the black-clothed old man disdainfully said. The old man's palm gradually turned blood red, and the surrounding water instantly evaporated. Yi Shiwen could not help but gasp. This technique was extremely frightening. This old man was clearly much stronger than an expert of half-step legendary level. "Die!" The old man moved up instantly, and it appeared like his physique suddenly turned into a water sword and rushed straight towards the deep-water black snake king. A gigantic hand congealed out of nowhere and grabbed the beast into its grasp. And right then, it appeared as if an endless scarlet hell evolved instantaneously and crashed right into the body of the deep-water black snake king. Great blood handprint. Soaring dragon. The deep-water black snake king roared, and its giant body instantly churned up the endless seawater, sweeping off a section of seawater, which eventually took the form of a water dragon and rushed towards the incoming great blood handprint attack. The roars of a dragon were constantly reverberating across the seabed. Boom! The two sides did not stay idle and immediately started a decisive battle of life and death. With each collision between their blows, it seemed as if the world would collapse any second. Even the warships couldn't stand firm in the face of those terrifying shockwaves. The entire sea was being destroyed. Bang! The blood splashed into the seawater. The flesh and blood flew in all directions. A large but fresh wound could be seen on the body of the deep-water black snake king. The deep-water black snake king suddenly screamed pitifully, while at the same time, he spat out a water sword from his mouth, which turned into an ice-cold treasured sword and instantly rushed straight towards the old man. It was quite surprising to see that the old man stimulated Jin Qi inside his body, which burst out of his body and congealed into a bloody big hand. This scarlet big hand instantly caught the water sword and crushed it, and right after that, the big hand rushed towards the deep-water black snake king. Everyone was shocked while watching this scene. They were quietly watching this battle, as everyone knew that this end result of this battle was ultimately going to decide the life and death of the two sides. Their own fights were basically insignificant in this situation. Boom! There came a terrifying burst of sound, and the old man's big bloody hand directly pierced through the tail of the deep-water black snake king and ripped it off the very next instant. Yi Shiwen was quite surprised because this black-clothed old man was way too powerful than an average half-step legendary expert. Just like in the case of Qi Fifan, other half-step legendary experts weren't the match for this old man as well. If the deep-water black snake king was not seriously injured, he wouldn't be in such a miserable state. The deep-water black snake king was screaming again and trying to get away, but a bloody big hand was constantly in his pursuit. Boom! Accompanied by a terrifying sound of an explosion, that bloody big hand grabbed the deep-water black snake king. Since the old man already knew that the deep-water black snake king was injured, he couldn't possibly let go of this chance of slaughtering this formidable beast. "I don't want to die," the deep-water black snake roared, but its skull was directly grasped in the big bloody hand and instantly crushed, splashing the brain fluid and blood into the seawater. To be continued, dash. Chapter 211. Chapter 211. The eighth prince arrives. 2 months flew by, and for the great State, the war was getting more and more intense during the past 2 months. The royal clan had sent out its forces to siege for Maine by Magyar strongholds. The scope of war was getting bigger and bigger. Shiwen was also following the conquests of imperial forces. They performed distinguished service and achieved illustrious military exploits. The reputation of initially low-key ninth prince also rose up dramatically. Now everyone knew about his exploits and achievements. The people had come to realize that perhaps the ninth prince was yet another suitable candidate for the throne of Great State. However, for Shiwen, it seemed as if all of these achievements didn't have any relations with him. He only spent 1 month with the ninth prince's legion, then rushed back to Yuan school and began closed-door training. Now, it's been a month since Shiwen began the closed-door training, but it was nothing in the eyes of most people. After all, martial cultivation was something that continued for hundreds of years. However, the real problem was that a few days ago, the eighth prince finally came back from an ancient ruin and must have brought back some extremely valuable treasures from that place. The strongest expert of the younger generation, the Supreme Presence, was finally back as a legend. But mostly everyone in Yuan school was aware of the case. They knew that the duel between Shiwen and the eighth prince would most likely happen soon. Although the sect head had personally announced that he did not give the permit to this duel, but the eighth prince was not the type of man who would honestly obey the instructions. Everyone was kind of unsure in their hearts. But regardless of what everyone was thinking, the eighth prince finally arrived for Shiwen. A figure suddenly appeared flying from the void, and at the place where he descended, the air itself ruptured and pulled open the vacuum. It could be seen that a mighty existence had arrived at the main gate of Yuan school. Shiwen, come out to die. A young man, clad in a magnificent dragon robe and carrying a cold look on his face, suddenly roared. He had such a dominating presence that it swept off waves of lingqi in the air that went rolling across the gate. The entire surrounding was in a state of shock and chaos. One could clearly see that the eighth prince was courageous enough to clamor like this in front of Yuan school's gate. The eighth prince was soaring in the sky. The long spear in his hand was producing a buzzing noise, while there was a strange blood-red aura surrounding it. This blood-red aura was actually filled with the essence and blood of the enemies that had been killed by this spear. This spear was such a Kindaf tool, which could grow stronger as it continued to absorb the blood from the enemies. This caused a sensation throughout Yuan school. So many years had passed since the last time someone dared to be so arrogant to pull off such a stunt. A huge crowd of Yuan school's disciples arrived at the gate, but they were watching from afar. They simply didn't dare to approach because they could clearly sense a kind of cold and strange murderous aura. Even the true disciples didn't dare to go too close. They only surrounded the eighth prince while maintaining some distance. At this time, the disciples were worried for Shiwen. To be fair, they were well aware of the fact that Shiwen was very formidable. A few months ago, they had come to know about the profoundness of his skill and cultivation when they heard his fierce roar. No wonder he was made the fifth pro-disciple at such a young age. But the great strength of the eighth prince was not hidden from anyone. He dared to be so unruly in front of the main gate. The Kindaf courage he had was not something an ordinary expert could display so casually. The dreadful, imposing aura swept across while he was at the center of the formation of a huge field, which was solely made up of Zhen Yuan. If anyone went in, they would be in his absolute control. Eighth Prince, you are really presumptuous if you think you can be so rampant in front of my Yuan school's gate. A figure arrived floating from a peak. It was a true disciple. He was a genius of Yuan school, although not as talented as Qi Fifan and the other strongest true disciples. But he was also prestigious, very young, only about 100 years old, and had already stepped into the sixth stage of Truth Realm. He was one of the genius, peerless experts with limitless future prospects. In fact, the sect had put great efforts in nurturing a genius like him. You are courting death. Do you actually think you alone can stop me? The eighth prince said with a disdainful smile on his face. More than 100 years of practice, but you are nothing but a waste. You are bringing about your own destruction. That disciple's face suddenly flushed with anger. Even though he knew that in the future he would probably not be an opponent of the eighth prince, but as an especially nurtured genius disciple of the sect, his pride would not allow him retreat. The true disciple instantly shot. An eternal light descended from the sky and swept towards the eighth prince. I'll fulfill your wish of dying. The eighth prince shot as well, and instantly swept off as if a mountain of Jinyuan which went whistling towards the incoming attack. The eighth prince's attack immediately swept away as many things as possibly in the surrounding area. Boom! As the two attacks collided severely, it seemed as if the heaven and the earth were collapsing, setting off overwhelming air explosions everywhere. However, in just a flash of contact, the eighth prince's attack routed that true disciple's attack and instantly rushed towards that genius true disciple, while sweeping away all of the things on the way along with it. All of a sudden, he was completely cornered and had no way out. Poof! The genius disciple suddenly spurted out a mouthful of blood and was sent flying upside down. He got blasted away horizontally and his body was almost torn to pieces. As he fell down and fainted, the other true disciples immediately took him to the depths of Yuan School to find an elder to treat him. Everyone held their breath when they saw how the eighth prince used just one shot to seriously wound that true disciple. This eighth prince truly possessed earth-shattering might, and even the experts at the same cultivation level weren't his opponents. At this time, the disciple realized that this outcome was definitely the result of the eighth prince's recent adventure trip to an ancient ruin. No one knew what kind of heritage and treasures he obtained there, which turned him into such a fearful expert. Probably, he was now almost 10 or maybe 100 times more powerful than before. Pay attention, you ignorant disciples of Yuan School, the eighth prince said contemptuously. Sooner or later, I will bring you all under my royal reign. At this time, one could see the anger burning on the faces of Yuan School's disciples. After all, the eighth prince was actually looking down on them. However, after witnessing the scene where the blue sky was dyed red with that true disciple's blood, no one dared to step forward. Arrogant fool, don't you know you are standing right now? Suddenly, a voice burst out of the depths of Yuan School, and just then, the void was directly torn apart, and a big hand instantly grasped towards the eighth prince. This was the power of the world law, and it firmly fixed him on the ground. Old fool, we old guys shouldn't intervene into the matter of young people. Abruptly, a hoarse voice transmitted from behind the eighth prince, and in a flash, a big hand stretched out and severely clashed into the other big hand. Boom! A loud and terrifying explosion occurred and completely distorted the space. Now, everyone came to know that there was a tyrannical expert behind the eighth prince standing in his support. It should be a peerless master who backed the eighth prince. No wonder he dared to come alone to Yuan School. But, since he had a peerless master with him, he would be most useful than a mighty force. Humph! Our head has already said that this duel is not allowed. Do you not know? The voice coming from the depths of Yuan School asked. You should understand, this is the matter of young people. We must not meddle. In our young times, didn't we go on expeditions like this? Just remember, the winner takes all. The hoarse voice immediately replied. You old fox, don't you try to tamper with the concept. You know what our head means. Yishuan has not yet fully grown up, and know that if this duel is to take place 10 years from now, then we won't be having this argument right now. What if we send Qi Fiefan to fight with your eighth prince? Will that make you happy? The voice coming from Yuan School said disdainfully. The voice remained silent this time. However, the eighth prince suddenly spoke. The period of 10 years is too long. I make good use of my time. I will surely manage to increase my cultivation at the same rate he does for the next 10 years. So even after 10 years, he will be easily slaughtered by me. So why do you stop me now? The eighth prince sneered and said, I'm invincible, and no matter how powerful my enemy is, I will kill them all. One could see an absolute self-confidence hidden in his strong words, which were definitely the result of going on expeditions for so many years. Yi Shiwen, I am ready to pull down my cultivation to match with yours. Now, I dare you to take up my challenge. The eighth prince shouted, and the mighty sound waves instantly swept off towards the Yuan school. Can it be that you are too scared to come out? Are you afraid of death? Several disciples were holding their anger, although the eighth prince willingly pulled down his cultivation level. But he was still at a higher level and must have grasped several deeper world laws and principles, giving him a big advantage over Yi Shiwen. Why not? Since you are really dying to die, he'll gladly buy you a ticket to hell. An ice-cold voice arrived from the depths of Yuan school, and the blue silhouette of a person rushed flying from a peak. At this time, a youth, clad in blue clothes, flew towards the eighth prince. He released a dreadful, imposing aura which was surging high into the sky. His eyes were as deep as the stars as he was coldly staring at the eighth prince. Yi Shiwen arrived way too fast, and a dense bluish aura swept out of his body. There was an incomparably horrifying aura creeping around his body, giving him the presence of the reincarnation of an ancient emperor. They didn't collide, but their terrifying auras severely collided and set off shock waves in all directions. So you finally came to meet your death, the eighth prince said in a cold voice. To be continued. Chapter 212. Chapter 212. Same level showdown. So, you finally came to meet your death, the eighth prince said in a cold voice. Just because your practice time is 10 years ahead of mine, don't get ahead of yourself. Yi Shiwen contemptuously sneered. I'll crush you like an ant under my feet if we fight at the same level. You're just trying to provoke me, but I will kill you. No one can save you now. The eighth prince said in a cold voice, then took a step forward and took a commanding gesture while intently watching Yi Shiwen. The eighth prince's eyes were shining just like the ice-cold iron, while a large mass of Zhen Yuan was roaring on his body. There was an invincible confidence on his face, and it could be seen that he was not at all conceited about his strength. The terrifying strength he was displaying right now was the reason behind his unmatched self-confidence. Chop down this bastard prince into pieces. Does he actually think of himself as the emperor of Great Estate? He is nothing but an arrogant prince. Yes, there are over a dozen princes in the empire. The whole avenue is filled with princes. Might as well consider them as dogs. Don't hold back and completely chop them off. The disciples of Yuan school suddenly started to clamor. If the eighth prince was fighting at his full strength, then in their eyes, Yi Shiwen wouldn't have a shred of chance of winning. But now the situation was different. Yi Shiwen was able to kill Feng Kong, who was at a higher level. So, how could he possibly lose in the same level battle? You are done for, because even on the same level, I am invincible. The eighth prince coldly snorted and said, We won't be sure about that before the battle starts. Yi Shiwen said in a cold voice. Even if the eighth prince was on a higher level, it would be difficult to defeat him, but if it were to lose in the same level battle, then he might as well just commit suicide. The killing intention was surging and causing air explosions everywhere, producing violent explosion sounds. Both of their killing intentions were colliding fiercely, and none of them seemed to yield. Yi Ziwen's imposing aura completely released out, just like dreadful sea waves, and swept across the surrounding area. The terrifying aura of Truth Fourth Stage instantly released out, as he stared coldly at the eighth prince. It seemed like both of them were prepared to begin the same level battle any second. After practicing for a month, Yi Shiwen finally broke from the peak of Truth Third Stage to the peak of Truth Fourth Stage in one fell swoop across, but his battle efficiency didn't fully achieve a breakthrough to the Truth Sixth Stage. Although he expected his battle efficiency to reach the Truth Sixth Stage, but it still remained in the small truth realm. As it usually is the case, Yi Shiwen is at the peak of Truth Fourth Stage, but his battle efficiency is comparable to small truth realm. Truth Fifth Stage, there was a huge difference between the battle efficiencies offered by Truth Fifth Stage and Truth Sixth Stage. In fact, even if Yi Shiwen was able to break into the Truth Fourth Stage, his battle efficiency could only touch the early traces of Truth Sixth Stage. Yi Yi Zaiwen's inner state is a truth fourth stage. But thanks to tyrant body technique, his body is so tough and formidable that he is able to contain higher energy content, almost equivalent to the truth fifth stage. And with the help of special space, he has comprehended hell lot of world laws and principles in advance, almost comparable to the truth fifth stage, or perhaps even further. That's why his battle efficiency is comparable to the experts of small truth realm. However, Yi Shiwen was confident that if he could break through to the truth fifth stage, his battle efficiency would directly step into the peak of truth sixth stage, and then he would also be able to contend with the experts of truth seventh stage. This time, this major enhancement in Yi Zaiwen's cultivation was mainly due to the deep-water black snake King's Naiden. After he was beheaded by the black-clothed old man, Yi Shiwen had discussed with the ninth prince about handing over the Naiden to him. The ninth prince also very readily agreed to Yi Zaiwen's request, because he knew that this Naiden would help towards crazy enhancement in Yi Zaiwen's strength. And as he had already said that they had a common enemy, therefore he didn't hesitate in handing it over to Yi Shiwen. Also, by relying on this half-step legendary realm Naiden, Yi Zaiwen's cultivation skyrocketed all the way from the peak of truth third stage to the peak of truth fourth stage, and so far, he had only consumed 1/3 of the entire Naiden. If the eighth prince hadn't arrived all of a sudden, then he would have continued to consume the remaining Naiden, and would have reached all the way to the small truth realm. By that time, he could have sufficient battle strength to deal with the eighth prince at full strength. Now, the eighth prince was at the peak of truth sixth stage, and he had reaped big benefits from his adventure trip to ancient ruins. However, he didn't have time to consume the looted exploits from the ruins. As soon as he obtained the news about Feng Kong's death at the hands of Yi Shiwen, he was very furious and rushed back. No one dared to lay their hands on his Imperial Guards, but this Yi Shiwen actually slaughtered the commander of Imperial Guards. How could he possibly tolerate such a thing? Ha 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 ha! The eighth prince laughed while a domineering aura was overflowing throughout his body and his cold eyes were glaring at Yi Shiwen, as if he was looking at a dead man. It seemed like no one else existed in his world but himself. The eighth prince was exuding a transcendental aura as if he had been baptized in the ancient ruins. After returning from that place, he had become much more extraordinary than before. Well, since it's the same level battle, it should be fair. The voice transmitted from the depths of Yuan School, and the big hand extended towards the eighth prince's body and placed a seal on his cultivation, limiting it to the small truth realm, thereby making his cultivation level same as that of Yi Shiwen. NT. Although Yi Shiwen is at the peak of truth fourth stage, but to others, he appears like an expert of small truth. Well, he actually packs the battle efficiency of a small truth level expert, so we cannot blame others to miscalculate his real level. Even now, the eighth prince still held a considerable advantage. After all, Yi Shiwen could only compete with experts of small truth realm or below, but only when his opponents were ordinary experts, and the eighth prince couldn't be taken lightly, considering his 10 years of extra experience and unbeatable battle record. Not to forget, he was the undefeated genius of the younger generation, so his battle prowess was going to be tyrannical, even with the seal on. Whatever be the case, there was self-confidence brimming on his face even after the seal was applied on his cultivation by the big hand. He was certain that he would kill Yi Shiwen today. Not to mention, it could be said that even after applying a seal on his power, he was still at a higher level than Yi Shiwen when considering Yi Zaiwen's actual cultivation level. If he was still unable to kill Yi Shiwen, then he might as just commit suicide. Prepared to die? Here I come. The eighth prince roared, and his roar broke through the limits of rivers and mountains. He rushed straight towards Yi Shiwen, while bringing shock waves of air along with him. It seemed as if a massive mountain was falling towards Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen also roared at the same time and instantly released a tremendous amount of Zhen Yuan from his body. And immediately, a long blade appeared in his hand as he furiously chopped out a large arc of blade light towards the eighth prince. Boom! The spear in the eighth prince's hand severely collided with Yi Zaiwen's long blade and induced a terrifying blast in the surrounding region. This blast was so intense that it twisted the space itself and sent both of them flying back. The battle efficiency of both sides was incomparably horrifying. Since Yi Shiwen could display the battle strength of Small Truth Realm, and despite being sealed to Small Truth Realm, the 8th Prince could still display the battle strength of higher levels, thanks to his huge battle experience. This round could be considered as a draw, pertaining to the same level of skills the two of them showed just now. When the 8th Prince had heard the news about Feng Kong's death, he got so angry that it seemed as if his anger would burn the sky. He couldn't wait to consume the exploits from his latest adventure and directly rushed to kill Yi Shiwen. If he had gotten a chance to assimilate the treasures, then he would be much more tyrannical than now. Yi Shiwen was slightly surprised a moment. How could the enemy be so terrifying even after suppressing his level to the Small Truth Realm? No wonder he was so confident that he came straight to Yi Yuan School from the ruins solely to kill Yi Shiwen. If the 8th Prince hadn't suppressed his cultivation level, then while facing him at his real strength, perhaps Yi Shiwen really wouldn't stand a chance. But Yi Shiwen did not lose confidence even though the enemy was so formidable. So what if the enemy was tyrannical? As everyone said, if Yi Shiwen was given the option to practice for 10 years, he would be able to take on the 8th Prince. However, what they didn't know that he actually wouldn't require 10 years to surpass the 8th Prince. I can see that you have got some means to fight back, but you and I are sworn enemies from the moment you opposed me. And without a doubt, you are doomed to die. The 8th Prince slowly expressed his hatred. Yi Shiwen was somewhat speechless. When did he actually choose to oppose this 8th Prince? In reality, he had been forced into all of this mess. However, afterward, he certainly did things to provoke the 8th Prince. NT. Old habits die hard. Right, Mr. Provoker MC? Tongue sticking out, his overbearing style could be easily inferred. In fact, it could be easily traced back to the same origin as that of Feng Kong and the other Imperial Guards. Imai Xiangqing, traceable to the same stock, idiom, of a common origin. However, it was obvious that he was completely mistaken about the concepts of power and prestige. One could literally see stars exploding in Yi Zaiwen's ice-cold eyes, as if the universe was taking birth in the depths of his eyes. You talk too much nonsense. Yi Shiwen shouted loudly, and the long blade danced in his hand. A long arc of blade light crawled through the sky and fell towards the 8th Prince. This blade attack was so tyrannical and terrifying. It seemed as if the sky was breaking apart into several pieces. The 8th Prince's spear pierced through the sky, and layer after layer of energy waves swept across in all directions, while the tyrannical spear attack advanced towards Yi Zaiwen's blade attack. The spectators could clearly hear the roaring sounds of two mighty forces, but Yi Shiwen, in particular, appeared exceptionally overbearing and tyrannical. It seemed as if he commanded a mighty force. In fact, even his imposing aura resembled that of an overlord of the battlefield. Yi Zaiwen's killing intention and imposing aura were so overwhelming that they were directly affecting the people's consciousness. In a flash, the blade attack fiercely collided with spear attack and resulted in an astounding explosion. Boom! A giant mushroom ascended towards the sky. The two tyrannical attacks mutually obliterated each other and gave birth to this giant mushroom cloud which continued to get bigger and bigger and swept across, engulfing everything on the way. The disciples suddenly looked frightened. Was this really a duel between two experts at Small Truth Realm? Some of the disciples were caught in the aftermath of that terrifying explosion and were seriously injured. If they were not being protected by the barrier enchantment, set up and maintained by an elder of a Yuan school, which blocked most of the complementary shockwaves from the blast, then they wouldn't have survived at all. But even so, some of the disciples got injured because several cracks appeared on the barrier enchantment. Due to that, the elder who was charged with maintaining the barrier enchantment had to increase its toughness in order to resist the upcoming tyrannical collisions like this. Boom! They collided again since there wasn't the slightest pause in this duel. Both sides continued to attack again and again. An incomparably scary light erupted in the horizon and completely obscured the entire sky. To be continued. Chapter 213. NT. First Regular Chapter. Chapter 213. four sacred beasts. Not even a minute had passed since the duel began, but the two experts already exchanged more than 10 moves, with each being extremely terrifying and earth-shattering. Their speeds were rising slowly and gradually, and in a while, to the eyes of spectators, it seemed as if both of them turned into colorful streamers of light and were rapidly colliding back and forth. In fact, the Sciention-level disciples could merely see the fierce collisions between a blue light and a yellow light. And even for the truth-level experts, it was getting difficult to clearly observe this duel, since they couldn't follow the movements of the two contenders. All they could see was a duel between two afterimages. It's really horrible that these two peerless heroes of this generation had to bump into each other so early. Right, although the eighth prince is arrogant, but we must admit that his strength simply goes against the heaven's will. He is definitely not some ordinary braggart. Even in a low-level battle with Yi Shiwen, he is able to display such battle efficiency. I must say that both his talent and strength defy the heaven's will. Although we must also consider that Yi Xiwen's cultivation level is too far behind that of the eighth prince, but he still managed to fight back on equal terms. Not to forget, even after putting the seal on the eighth prince's cultivation, the resulting level was small truth, and Yi Xiwen's actual cultivation is less than that, but Yi Shiwen still didn't fall under the wind. It is too shocking. I am afraid we will have to agree that Yi Shiwen really is a legend, the next rising chief fiefin of Yi Yuan school. The disciples of Yi Yuan school were discussing among themselves, and this time, they weren't discussing the arrogance and overbearing attitude of the eighth prince. After all, they witnessed his terrifying strength in this stunning duel, which captured all their attention. However, while they were discussing, the duel became more and more intense, and an astonishing collision occurred between the two. There's no point to this duel. All your resistance is futile since you are just a stepping stone and destined to become a pile of bones on the road to my success and glory. The eighth prince expressed his overbearing self-confidence in a loud voice. As soon as his voice faded, four huge golden seals appeared out of nowhere and started spinning around him. At the same time, layer after layer of Jin Yuan started surging up in the eighth prince's body. And as his Jin Yuan was constantly bursting out of his body, these four huge golden seals instantly began to change shape. And in just a blink of an eye, huge, beastly shadows appeared in the battlefield. Azure Dragon, Phoenix, White Tiger, Black Tortoise, these four god beasts instantly appeared in front of the eighth prince. Each of these beasts was huge, almost 100 feet tall, and looked magnificent while positioned in complete defense formation in front of Himas if pushing chock full. It seemed like in their presence, it would simply be impossible to approach the eighth prince. The four beast spirits, which transformed from the four huge golden seals, turned their heads towards the sky and began to roar fiercely. It seemed like their roars were shaking the entire world, as if the four sacred beasts had really descended from the heaven into this world. The eighth prince jumped onto the Azure Dragon's head and looked at Yi Shiwen like an ancient god of war. He appeared indifferent, heartless, and incomparably formidable. And while standing on that Azure Dragon's head, he seemed like the commander of the Heaven's Dragon community. The disciples of Yi Yuan school were suddenly panic-stricken. In fact, even the true disciples had their complexions fade instantly when the eighth prince's terrifying coercion suddenly swept off. Suddenly, in the depths of Yi Yuan school, several tyrannical experts started talking to each other through soul search technique. Truth-level experts can use soul search to sense each other's presence / like a mobile to talk to each other / for mind control and probing the minds. Like Luo Yifan had tried on Yi Shiwen to destroy his mind, but Yi Shiwen was saved by special space. Could it be that the eighth prince has obtained the heritage of the ancient Four Sacred Beast sect of the southeast region? Four Sacred Beast sect. Are you talking about that mighty ancient sect that was rumored to have run amok in the ancient martial world, long back in the past? The Four Sacred Beasts sect was able to accumulate over 1 million disciples and had outclassed all other rival sects in the southeast region. But later during the Devil invasion, it was completely destroyed. Their headquarters also disintegrated and fell into the turbulent flow of space. So, this eighth prince managed to obtain the heritage of that ancient Four Sacred Beasts sect? It should be true because I have read about the 4 sacred seals in some old antiquarian books. This is most likely the ancient martial technique of the great 4 sacred beasts sect. However, it's supposedly a top-tier martial arts technique, and I can see that the 4 beasts that have been summoned by the 8th prince are nothing like the real deal. The 8th prince must have used the blood of the demon beasts that contained the bloodline of the original 4 sacred beasts. But even so, this technique is very ominous. It seems like Yi Shiwen is in big trouble. These 4 beasts are the guardian beasts between the heaven and earth. They are said to be the direct embodiment of the world laws. Now, while facing these 4 sacred beasts at once in this duel, he is going to fight at a great disadvantage. Don't forget, Yi Shiwen is no fool, and he is certainly not an ordinary person. He is a fierce and formidable figure, and will certainly have a way to deal with this situation. Yes, Yi Shiwen is a rare genius of our Yuan school. When he grows up, he will turn into the next chief fiefin of our sect. Not to mention, he is one of the 5 pro-disciples and one of the brilliant disciples of the younger generation of Great Yu State. Our head has personally announced support and protection to him, so you can put your mind at ease and relax. Let's wait and see how the battle unfolds. Yi Shiwen. It appears that this 8th prince truly had a great and fortuitous adventure. Yimo's voice resounded in Yi Ziwen's mind. I never expected him to summon the 4 sacred beasts. Is it that terrible? Yi Shiwen asked. Of course, it's very powerful, and the genuine 4 sacred beasts are the supreme gods of heaven and earth. These beasts actually transcend the 3 realms and are said to be the masters of all 5 elements. There are legends about them in all of the 10,000 worlds, and especially in your human world. Yimo said, there are rumors that they were entrusted with the task of guarding the 10,000 worlds, and in each world, they take different avatars. And all of the world laws between the heaven and the earth obey their command, granting them abnormally terrifying might. But fortunately, the 8th prince has summoned only their imitations. However, since these imitations have the features and powers of the original mythical beasts, it's going to be hard to deal with them. There was a sullen look on Yi Ziwen's face. He knew from the outset that the 8th prince was a tough opponent. After all, his subordinate, Feng Kong, too, was such a difficult guy to deal with. However, he wasn't the slightest bit discouraged. Defeating stronger enemies to prove that his way was right. This had been his style all along. Anyway, he had already planned to sweep away any and all obstacles in his way, and thereby pave the way to his destination, the peak of martial arts world. But before he could obtain the full explanation from Yimo, the 8th prince made his move. The dragon beneath his feet instantly moved and rushed roaring towards Yi Shiwen. The horrifying aura of the 4 sacred beast spirits suddenly burst forward and pressed down towards Yi Shiwen. It seemed as if the 8th prince was the emperor of this world, like an omnipotent god, and right now, this god had directed all his might towards Yi Shiwen. This was the might of terror, which directly swept towards Yi Shiwen. But at this time, Yi Shiwen also made his move, and poisonous dragon water control flag array instantly soared out, and the terrifying figure of Deepwater Black Serpent King suddenly appeared and coiled around Yi Shiwen. One could see dragon scales on its skin, the abnormally protruding 4 limbs, and the hook-like angled head. All of this was announcing that this Deepwater Black Snake King was about to evolve into a water dragon. Everyone gasped at this scene, because they could clearly see that this beast was about to evolve into the realm of dragons. So horrifying. They could easily figure out that this beast used to be at the half-step legendary realm when it was alive, but it was then killed by Yi Shiwen, and its precious corpse fell into the hands of Yi Shiwen, who then used it to upgrade his divine tool. This actually transformed the image of Yi Shiwen in their hearts as that of a fearful expert. But only Yi Shiwen knew that this Deepwater Black Snake King had been killed by the old man in black clothes. After being killed, its corpse fell into the hands of Yi Shiwen and was completely absorbed by the poisonous dragon water control flag. It was needless to say how precious the corpse of a half-step legendary realm demon beast actually was. Needless to say, this beast was also the king of Deepwater Black Serpents. Hence, its corpse was an extremely precious treasure and could be used to refine powerful tools. But in order to win Yi Zaiwen's support by giving respect and honor, the ninth prince handed over the corpse of the deep-water black Serpent King to Yi Shiwen. In fact, not just that, he also gifted the corpses of thousands of other deep-water black serpents to Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen offered the sacrifice of the corpses of these deep-water black serpents to enhance the 18 surface poisonous dragon water control flag. In addition to that, he used the half-step legendary level corpse of the deep-water black Serpent King to form a new array to the flag. Whiz, whiz, whiz sound resounded several times, and from the side of Yi Shiwen, several deep-water black snakes flew out roaring from the poisonous dragon water control flag array. Looking at the mighty forms of these serpents, it seemed as if they were simply reborn because they had become much more formidable than before. Yi Shiwen obtained the corpses of over 1,000 deep-water black snakes and fed their souls to these original deep-water black snakes, making them transform into such mighty beasts. But because of the limited time, these few snakes could just evolve to the peak of Truth 5th stage. However, in doing so, almost 1/5 of the total 1,000 deep-water black snakes were already consumed. This divine tool had not yet fully formed its battle efficiency as originally envisaged by Yi Shiwen. After a complete feeding time and fully maturing, all sides of the 18-sided poisonous dragon water control flag array would take true shape. Then at least each side of the flag array would be able to reach the Truth 9th stage. Not to forget that one side of this flag array contained a half-step legendary realm beast soul. So, after successfully applying all the amendments to improve this flag array as he originally planned, the flag array would display its true might. And then with its help, Yi Shiwen would be able to contend with the experts of half-step legendary realm. In other words, right now, this flag array was just a semi-finished product. But even so, Yi Shiwen didn't have any other means to face the boundless might of the four sacred beasts. He could only bite the bullet and brace himself. One by one, the deep-water black snakes rushed forward on the battlefield, and suddenly, numerous disciples were amazed at this scene. Some of them had previously witnessed Yi Zaiwen's flag array, but most of them had not seen such a magnificent divine tool. To be continued. NT. I am back. I have been busy with terrifying and tyrannical real-life stuff, engineering projects, exams, and industrial training, but now it's all over. Time to start the MGS train. Just to compensate for the negligible releases in the past few months, I am doubling the regular releases from 3 regular releases per week to 6 regular releases per week. About sponsored chapters, well, they depend on the donations, and there's no set number for that. I will release sponsored chapters only after I am done with the targeted 6 regulars/week. So, please send donations only after I have released all 6 chapters due for the week. Enjoy! Chapter 214, Second Regular Chapter, Chapter 214, 8th Prince's Fatal Error. At this time, there was a look of shock on the 8th Prince's face. He never thought that Yi Shiwen would actually have such a hidden card. However, now he didn't have a way out of this situation. He must finish what he started and behead Yi Shiwen in order to save his reputation. On one side stood a large array of the 4 sacred beasts, namely the Azure Dragon, White Tiger, the Phoenix, and the Black Tortoise. While on the other side stood the even bigger array of 19 gigantic deep-water black snakes of poisonous dragon water control flag, and not to forget that one of them being the deep-water black snake king. All the disciples had horrified expressions on their faces as they were anticipating an earth-shattering collision between these 2 peerless geniuses. Between the 2 of them, any of whom could be considered as an unimaginably tyrannical presence. The 4 sacred beasts and the gang of deep-water black snakes severely collided. Boom! Giving rise to an inexhaustible air explosion and forming a large vacuum belt. It seemed as if the surrounding space had been shattered by this explosion. Both sides were submerged in the terrifying fluctuations of space and energy, while at the same time, the deep-water black snakes and the 4 sacred beast spirits fiercely rushed towards each other and clashed maliciously. The entire air was boiling as the fierce beastly roars continued to resound throughout the region. There was chaos everywhere while the surrounding space was slowly cracking and collapsing. It seemed just like the collapse of this entire world. The terrible scene scared everyone to death, as they could clearly see that this decisive battle was almost reaching its end. Roar! Roar! All kinds of horrifying, beastly roars were directly impacting the clouds in the sky and shaking the atmosphere. This was truly a fight between ominous beasts, which was actually able to shake the heaven and the earth. Clang! Eighth Prince's spear was once again wrapped in a terrifying light. The dragon beneath his feet began to roar loudly as he again advanced towards Yi Shiwen. The energy surrounding the spear started getting bigger and bigger and fell towards Yi Shiwen. It seemed as if a mountain was collapsing upon him. The spear packed an invincible might, to the extent that it simply punctured through the atmosphere and spread chaos everywhere. This scene was literally like the birth of the world. There was a calm look on Yi Zaiwen's face. He didn't say anything, he was very calm. Irrespective of the kind of attacks enemy was throwing at him, there was no way to shake his confidence. Yi Shiwen shot his long blade, releasing an equally fearful attack in the form of blade light towards the incoming attack. Yi Zaiwen's blade attacks were extremely horrifying, to the extent that each of his blade attacks was capable of cutting open through the space. Boom! 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 The two experts collided again, but this time, they staggered away from each other. In a flash, the flesh and blood flew in all directions. The disciples felt their hearts tremble. Who was hurt? Whose blood was this? Yuan School's disciples were naturally hoping that Yi Shiwen was okay, that it wasn't him who got hurt. As the light dispersed, everyone saw the Eighth Prince's figure, standing atop the Azure Dragon. They were shocked to find that his whole arm was almost torn off by Yi Zaiwen's long blade, and the blood was constantly dripping down his arm. No one expected that Yi Shiwen would actually turn out to be so formidable that he would manage to almost chop off the Eighth Prince's arm. After seeing the Eighth Prince's blood flying in front of their eyes, everyone was stunned. There was pin-drop silence on the battlefield. The Eighth Prince almost fell off the Azure Dragon's head. Could it be that the Eighth Prince was not a match of Yi Shiwen in a same-level duel? No, in fact, Yi Shiwen was only an expert of Truth 4th stage, and his enemy was an expert of much higher level. This in itself was not a fair fight, but even so, the duel should have been in favor of the Eighth Prince. In the end, what was the true extent of Yi Zaiwen's strength? You actually dared to hurt me. Now no one can save you from my wrath. The Eighth Prince's body suddenly exuded a strange, godly aura, and soon, the wound on his arm gradually began to heal, was no longer bleeding like earlier. There was a very simple reason behind why the bleeding suddenly stopped. It was because Yi Zaiwen's Daoqi was still lingering in his wound and was constantly devouring his wounds, so this was the fundamental reason why he could not recover. Just now, the strange godly aura instantly expelled Yi Zaiwen's Daoqi and allowed the bleeding to stop. Yi Shiwen sneered but didn't say anything, just looked coldly at the Eighth Prince. The Eighth Prince grinned cruelly while he was standing on the Azure Dragon's head and holding a spear in one hand. And suddenly, he rushed towards Yi Shiwen. The spear in the Eighth Prince's hand began to produce buzzing noise and instantly evolved into a huge cage of energy, which then went towards Yi Shiwen in order to suppress him and choke him to death. Yi Shiwen didn't waste any time, just rushed forward and waved the long blade in his hand, thereby releasing 9 blade shadows, which then fiercely collided with the spear attack in the sky. Boom! The two attacks glittered as they severely collided and suddenly began to exude terrifying rays of light in the sky. Pucci! The spear left a fatal wound on Yi Zaiwen's waist, inducing a deadly trail of blood across his waist. This was the first time Yi Shiwen got injured in this duel, but the Eighth Prince was in a worse state. A horrible wound had opened up on his chest, and the blood was crazily oozing out of it. What's going on? That Eighth Prince actually fell under the wind. How is this possible? How can this Yi Shiwen be so formidable? Several disciples exclaimed while there was shock and surprise on their faces. Although they always thought of the Eighth Prince as an arrogant and annoying guy, but deep in their hearts, they could still not deny his overwhelming might. Although they did not want to admit it, but the powerful image of the eighth prince was deeply rooted in their hearts, so they never thought that he would actually fall under the wind. The scene that unfolded in front of their eyes was simply beyond their original expectation. This was an unprecedented matter. Not even the eighth prince himself ever imagined such an outcome. Since his debut and the beginning of his so-called world conquest, he had never fallen under the wind in a same-level duel. Not to mention he had never fought such a one-sided battle. Not to forget, he was the one who instigated this duel and still ended up falling under the wind. This was just too ridiculous and unexpected. In fact, he was not unaware that he made a blunder of underestimating Yi Shiwen and fell into his own trap. He could sense intense threat from Yi Shiwen. He was aware of the fact that Yi Shiwen was so young and still managed to kill Feng Kong, who was clearly at a higher level. It was obvious that Yi Shiwen was capable of fighting with experts of higher level, but he just never expected that Yi Shiwen would turn out to be so terrifying. Despite being at a fairly higher level, he had been completely suppressed by Yi Shiwen. Suddenly, an ominous and dense aura manifested around Yi Shiwen. He didn't wait for the eighth prince to recover and attacked, but this time he didn't use an ordinary blade skill. What he used was actually a horrifying sword intention, which instantly swept across and completely engulfed everything in the surroundings. Looking at the overwhelming might of this sword intention, no one could guess the rank of this skill. Immediately, the entire expanse of the sky was engulfed in the brilliance of this sword intention, whereas the nearby mountains couldn't stand its presence and disintegrated to bits. Everyone had a feeling in their hearts that if anyone tried to stand in its way, they would be instantly obliterated, leaving nothing behind. Eighth Prince's complexion suddenly paled. This was the first time such a terrified expression appeared on his face, other than the usual ice-cold expression. He cursed in his heart and thought that this Yi Shiwen was not playing by the rules and suddenly shot the sword intention, carrying such an out-of-the-world destructive power. Moreover, he could sense that there was an inherent meaning of creative concept hidden inside the sword intention. But the eighth prince couldn't understand how Yi Shiwen managed to practice it to such a profound level that it so effortlessly smashed his spirit illusions. This attack was extremely fearful and was virtually impossible to guard against. Yi Shiwen so casually switched from using blade-based attacks to using a sword skill to catch his enemy off guard. He carefully waited for the right moment to unleash the sword intention, a strange but deadly skill he picked up from that fearful swordsman. And right then, Yi Shiwen finally decided to go all out and fully unleashed his long-trained combat style. Blade Light, Sword Intention, Palm Shadow. One after another, Yi Shiwen was unleashing various techniques and skill without any rules and patterns, totally random. As if all of these skills were on his fingertips and invoking them was a child's play for him. This clearly showed that he had a very high-level understanding of the martial arts when compared to his peers. Gradually, the eighth prince was completely pressed under the wind. Needless to say, no matter how high level he was at before the seal was placed on him, but right now, the best he could do was display the might of small truth at best. And when considering the level of understanding of martial arts, who could possibly beat Yi Shiwen? So long as it was at the same level, no one could contend with Yi Shiwen. Not to forget, when Yi Shiwen was at true third stage, he was able to compete with the experts of small truth level. And now that he stepped into the truth fourth stage, he should possess enough battle efficiency to beat any and all experts of small truth level. Of course, eighth prince was just too tyrannical, and that's how he managed to survive this long in the duel. Otherwise, any other expert would have been slaughtered in one shot by Yi Shiwen. Indeed, most probably, would be split into two halves, laughing face. Being able to last so long against Yi Shiwen, the eighth prince certainly proved his well-deserved reputation. Of course, only Yi Shiwen and Yi Mo would think so. Everyone else was simply dumbfounded to witness that Yi Shiwen was prevailing in the duel. But now, the battle had thoroughly fallen into the hands of Yi Shiwen, and it was time to end this once and forever. Choosing to fight Yi Shiwen at the small truth level was really the biggest mistake committed by the so-called perfectionist, the Eighth Prince. Eighth Prince, your legend ends today. Your decision to fight me at the same level was the biggest mistake you'll ever make. Yi Shiwen gave out a loud shout, and a burst of energy broke out of his body. To be continued. Chapter 215, Third Regular Chapter. Chapter 215. Eighth Prince defeated. Perhaps if the Eighth Prince was in his peak condition, he might have been able to kill Yi Shiwen. But it just so happened that he was too conceited and made a fatal error of challenging Yi Shiwen to the same level duel. Everyone was anxious at this moment. They were fully aware of the extraordinary prowess of these two experts, and the fact that both were capable of effortlessly beating any expert of small truth realm. But at this time, the young among the two was able to completely suppress the other. "But I was so sure of your death," the Eighth Prince said with an unwilling look on his face. He was cursing himself for committing his biggest mistake. Rather than blaming himself for being so conceited, he was feeling pain in his heart for facing such a miserable situation. Conquest between peerless experts of each generation was always an extremely cruel occurring, and everyone knew that. But in every generation, there were always few experts who were able to reach the summit of the conquest, and later in life, they would also come to control several major forces. If only these two could have avoided this duel, at least in few decades, they would have certainly obtained influential positions in the major forces of Great Yu State. But the duel took place ahead of time. Yi Xiwen's battle strength was too terrifying, and he easily managed to suppress the Eighth Prince. Eighth Prince's spear possessed tremendous might. Each of its strikes was capable of shattering the space. It seemed to be releasing a tyrannical chi, which was as if coming straight from the grasp of the kind of the world. And each blade attack of Yi Shiwen seemed to be cutting open the world itself and breaking the entire universe. While they were fighting and clashing with each other, it would appear like a terrible collision between two planets, leaving the horrifying aftermath of the explosion everywhere. And with each collision, the enchantment barrier would almost collapse by shattering into several pieces and dispersing. The disciples held their breaths as these scenes of terror continued to unfold in front of their eyes. These two men were undoubtedly the supreme leaders of the younger generation. Especially, the true disciples were simply frustrated to death after witnessing such a scene. Of course, they were among the elite geniuses of Yuan school, but when compared with the two peerless geniuses fighting in front of their eyes, their own accomplishments were nothing. They had the kind of feeling their hair fall off to the ground while thinking about the shame they felt for not having the capability to carry on such a fight. After all, their strength was far worse. This in itself was not necessarily going to determine the winner of the conquest, as long as the vast majority of peers could be beheaded, and in that case, the battle between these two could have been avoided. However, now the fight was close to the end, and since the Eighth Prince's ambition was to dominate the world, he actually needed to destroy all obstacles with his own hands. Ah! The Eighth Prince looked up towards the sky and gave out a long and loud battle cry. And at the same time, a terrifying burst of monstrous energy rushed throughout the spear in his hand. Eight Prince's previous heroic aura had disappeared, and only a boundless killing aura remained in its place. His tall stature appeared quite domineering, just like a huge mountain, when he suddenly rushed towards Yi Shiwen. However, he still couldn't injure Yi Shiwen. In fact, his attack was easily blocked. The Eighth Prince was incomparably overbearing, to the extent that even though he had been fully suppressed by Yi Shiwen in the duel, he still didn't switch to defensive play and kept on going all out. An example of infinite courage. The duel is reaching its end so soon? I never expected that the dignified Eighth Prince would be so close to facing a disastrous defeat. It's strange, Yi Shiwen is too strong, and witnessing his performance in this duel, he is certainly worthy of the title of Yuan School's fifth pro-disciple. The Eighth Prince really had it coming. He actually wanted to use Yi Shiwen as a stepping stone in his world quest. Even if our head declared his full support and protection of Yi Shiwen, he still dared to pull off such a stunt. This clearly shows that he looks down on us. All of the disciples felt that this duel's outcome would be out any minute. Yi Zaiwen's facial expression looked even more callous while the blade light completely quelled the eighth prince. Ah! Eighth prince roared again and again, and suddenly shot his spear, which stabbed towards Yi Shiwen like an endlessly falling mountain. The approaching flying spear looked dazzling and colorful, just like a small sun. Look at yourself. Now you are nothing but a cornered beast. Yi Shiwen roared and shot his palm, which then turned into a coiling dragon and flew towards the incoming spear. Boom! The resulting horrifying blast even obliterated the atoms in the atmosphere. The eighth prince's spear collided with Yi Zaiwen's dragon claw and stagnated. It simply couldn't advance. Yi Zaiwen's both hands turned into coiling dragons and soared towards the sky, like two god beasts, suppressing and obliterating everything in the surroundings. Eighth Prince's face finally revealed a look of panic and terror. In so many years of his life, he had never been suppressed so thoroughly by anyone. Now that he was facing Yi Shiwen, he was just like a cornered beast. No matter how much he tried, it was still extremely difficult for him to escape from Yi Zaiwen's attacks. Yi Zaiwen's palm turned into a coiling dragon, which swept its huge tail towards the eighth prince. He used the strongest move of coiling dragon palm. Divine Dragon swings its tail. Eighth prince was sent flying several hundred miles away, along with the spear, and finally fell on the ground. No one knew how many bones shattered in his body. His clothes were tattered, his hair scattered in all directions. He no longer looked like the heroic prince he was when he arrived earlier. Now he was just a miserable-looking warrior who was on the verge of losing everything he accumulated so far in his life. But the duel was not over yet. Before the eighth prince could take a breath of relief, a spear came piercing across the sky and stabbed into his body. Eighth prince was simply not prepared for this and was directly pierced by the spear. Boom! The eighth prince was punched on top of a mountain peak by his own spear, and suddenly, the entire peak was cut off in half by the inconceivable might of the spear. The eighth prince was still struggling, roaring again and again. 1/3 of the mountain had already been smashed by the enormous might of the spear. But then suddenly, the fearful seal on the spear tip started to glow intermittently and instantly activated, thereby completely sealing off the prince's strength. Yi Shiwen flew across the sky and landed next to the pale-looking eighth prince, then said, "As pathetic as you are right now, do you still want to kill me? I told you, in a same-level battle, I will squash you like a bug. I dare you to fight a fair battle with me. Since my real strength was sealed by your elder, I couldn't show my complete strength." The eighth prince clamored, while there was still a murderous look in his eyes, but not so intense like earlier. "Fair, you say? How ridiculous! You are far above my level, but you still rushed here to kill me. Now you want a fair duel?" Yi Shiwen said in a ridiculing manner. The eighth prince was furious, but he couldn't do anything. Right now, his martial arts and skill had been sealed by his own spear, and he couldn't even move. "So now you can stop going on expeditions. Maybe try next time, in your next life," Yi Shiwen said, and the long blade instantly danced in his hand. The surrounding disciples immediately exclaimed and started celebrating. Yi Shiwen finally defeated the eighth prince and saved their face. And this was simply beyond anyone's expectation. However, if he killed the eighth prince, then it would create a huge sensation throughout the Great Yu State. After defeating the eighth prince, the one who actually intended to dominate the entire Great Yu State, it was obvious that Yi Shiwen was going to become very famous. "I refuse to accept this outcome," the eighth prince suddenly shouted, and this time there was fear in his eyes. He was scared of Yi Shiwen since he had never bumped into a tyrannical expert like him. Yi Shiwen was just like an indomitable person, a truly fearful and bizarre existence, and the eighth prince finally realized it. "Stop!" A loud shout transmitted from far away, and suddenly, a big hand opened a crack in the space and stretched towards the eighth prince. Yi Shiwen frowned. How could he possibly forget the terrifying expert who arrived along with the eighth prince? Yi Shiwen immediately seized the eighth prince's body and threw across the sky. The eighth prince's body was sent flying at an extremely fast speed and it escaped from the reach of that big hand. "What do you want?" Yi Shiwen said coldly and looked towards the void. "Young man, this duel is over," that hoarse voice said. A skinny old man's figure suddenly appeared from the void. "Duel, you say? You think this was really just a duel?" Yi Shiwen sneered and said, "This time you've won. Just respect the rule of so-called forgive and forget. The royal clan will owe you one." The old man said, "Humph, what will I do with a royal favor? Do you think it's good enough to stand on level with this matter?" Yi Shiwen said in a strict voice. To others, perhaps royal favor was heavy as a mountain, but the same didn't apply to Yi Shiwen. His origin was extraordinary. He had come from a much advanced world with advanced societies, where the hierarchical system of monarchy was already a long-gone tradition. He rushed here to kill me. There was killing intention filled in his heart when he challenged me to the duel. In fact, he even said that he would take my life today. And you say that this was just a duel? Yi Shiwen said disdainfully. If he had won, would you show up to stop him from killing me? If I hadn't defeated him today, he and his spear would have taken so many innocent lives of countless geniuses. Would you persuade him to stop and convince him otherwise? No. All you can do is teach me a lesson on forgive and forget. In the end, you just follow double standards. You treat yourself and others based on two different sets of standards. Look, Yi Shiwen, the road ahead is long. Even if you possess God-given wisdom and talent, but you are still young and far from being a legend warrior. There's a long way to go, and you will face countless unknown obstacles along the way. So making a new friend is good for you. A hint of threat was apparent in the old man's words. To be continued. Chapter 216. Fourth regular chapter. Chapter 216. Demon Island bell rings. Look, Yi Shiwen, the road ahead is long. Even if you possess God-given wisdom and talent, but you are still young and far from being a legend warrior. There's a long way to go, and you will face countless unknown obstacles along the way. So making a new friend is good for you. A hint of threat was apparent in the old man's words. Are you threatening me? Yi Shiwen's complexion suddenly became dark and filled with anger. I'm just stating the fact, kid, the old man said in a casual manner. I don't need others to help me pave my way to success. Even if there are thorns in my way, I will completely chop them off and make my own way. Yi Shiwen was unmoved. He was standing in front of a Yuan school and wasn't afraid of the enemy. Yi Shiwen consecrated to the unusual repugnance towards the royal clan. Earlier, when the 8th prince was challenging him to a fight to the death, this old man said that the elders mustn't get involved in the fight of the young ones. And now that his own disciple's life was on the line, he interfered without thinking twice about his own statement. Two sets of standards were pretty obvious in this situation. I remember how you said just now that the old guys mustn't get involved in the matters of the younger generation. Now, you intend to go back on your words. Yi Shiwen said in a mocking voice. If I was the one nailed atop a mountain, would you come out to save me from your 8th prince? Look at the pious look on your face and the dignity you carry as an expert. It's fake in the end. You are not even ashamed of yourself, old man. You. The old man choked from the anger, bulging inside of him from Yi Shiwen's words, but he didn't dare to attack. After all, he was standing in front of Yi Yuan school. If he actually dared to attack Yi Shiwen, neither him nor the 8th prince would go back alive. Not to forget, the 8th prince's entire stunt was like provocation, as if looking down on Yi Yuan school. The 5 forces were capable of peaceful coexistence for so many years, naturally by not making sudden moves and abiding by the rules, and the 8th prince's everyday's clamoring about dominating the world itself was no different from committing the taboo. Who would want the 8th prince in power? One could simply and smoothly kill the 8th prince on this reason conveniently, and no one would be able to say anything. Not to mention, the royal clan wouldn't say anything. In fact, many people would be clapping and celebrating. The competition in royal clan was more brutal than other forces. Although the 5 pro-disciples were competing for the seat of Yi Yuan school's head. But they wouldn't stoop so low as to killing each other for its sake, because it was just a position and didn't give the right to continue one's own royal bloodline. However, the same was not true for the throne. In short, there's democracy in a Yuan school, but monarchy in royal clan. Eighth prince's death would greatly benefit the eldest prince, the second prince, the fourth prince, and now the ninth prince was also in the race. Not to mention, other major forces were supporting the aforementioned princes, and they certainly didn't approve of the eighth prince's ambition. So, even inside the royal clan, there were many people who didn't approve of the eighth prince's actions. After all, they didn't want to mess with the other major forces. Since they were fully aware of the fact that royal clan alone wasn't responsible for the foundation of Great Yu State. In fact, without the help of other forces, it would have been impossible for the royal clan to achieve such a feat. Many people were scared that if the eighth prince really got the throne and waged war against the other forces, the end result would be the destruction of royal clan. The overall strength of Yuan school and the other major forces was tyrannical. They possessed several legendary level experts, and while facing so many legendary level experts, the imperial legions would prove pretty useless. Since the rule of strength in number didn't stand a chance in front of a legendary level expert. Because of this, the royal clan was deliberately planning to keep strong ties with Yunqing sect. By doing so, it was barely maintaining a balance of power with Yuan school and the other two major forces. Even if he wanted to dominate the world, he shouldn't have kept blabbering about it all the time. Fear controls all, and people instinctively fear unknown. Therefore, considering the hostile elements inside the royal clan who hated the eighth prince, the old man didn't dare to get involved. I'm not the kind of person who easily gets scared of such empty threats. I just believe in fully repay of debt. Yi Shiwen sneered, and it seems today it's going to be difficult for your eighth prince to escape from the death's claws. Yi Shiwen lifted his long blade and was about to stab the eighth prince, and from the far distance, the old man's angry shout suddenly thundered. Ding! The melodious sound of a bell suddenly rang out of nowhere, as if transmitting from the sky, and instantly struck Yi Ziwen's mind. Yi Shiwen was completely left stunned for an instant. Ding! 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 One after another, the bell continued to ring. The old man looked at Yi Shiwen and couldn't understand what stunned him, but he saw the opportunity and immediately grabbed the eighth prince's body in his big hand and disappeared. You will pay for what you did today. Yi Shiwen, what's wrong? Wasn't he going to kill the eighth prince? Impossible. I can just feel Yi Ziwen's monstrous killing intention and anger. I don't understand why he didn't kill him while he had the chance. Then what happened exactly? God knows. Could it be that something happened and stopped Yi Ziwen's attack? Moments after the eighth prince was rescued by the old man, Yi Shiwen finally recovered and got extremely furious. However, what on the earth was that bell sound, and where did it come from? The news quickly spread throughout the Great Yu State among the warriors community. After a long period of 50 years, the Demon Island bell rang once again in the sky of Great Yu State. There were lots of legends related to the Demon Island in Great Yu State and several neighboring countries. The older experts were not much concerned about the Demon Island because, more or less, everyone knew about this strange island's connection with the younger generation disciples. Since the Demon Island only appeared once in every 50 years, and for an average person, it was a considerably long time. Naturally, no one knew about the background of the Demon Island. However, very soon, the legend of the Demon Island spread once again. According to the hearsay, long time ago, the Demon Island appeared in this world. There was no record of how long ago it really appeared, but after a cycle of every 50 years, it would appear in the East China Sea. Again, no one knew about the reason behind its appearance and disappearance and how it happened. Everyone knew only this much, that it would appear only once in 50 years, and each time with its appearance, a melodious bell would ring and call forth the chosen ones. Not anyone could listen to this bell sound, because only the leaders of younger generation could hear the melodious sound of this bell, and only these chosen few could enter into the island. Those who couldn't hear the bell summons shouldn't even dream about going to the Demon Island. Therefore, many people considered the bell summon as a standard. Those who heard the bell ringing were considered as young heroes of their respective sections. 50 years ago, Qi Fifan went to the Demon Island and reaped great benefits over there. That's how he could become so strong. And after a lapse of 5 decades, the Demon Island once again rang the bell, which gave rise to countless rumors. And like last time, this time, Yi Shiwen heard the call of the bell, which also became a staple of conversation for countless people. After receiving the summons from the Demon Island, finally, even the unwilling and most stubborn people had to recognize Yi Zaiwen's peerless talent and extraordinary abilities. This was no different from attaining instant glory overnight, since the Demon Island bell never summoned non-top geniuses. However, Yi Shiwen was not much excited or flattered about this, like everyone expected him to be. In fact, this thing was too weird since Yi Shiwen didn't know about the origin of this Demon Island. After continuously searching through books and materials for a few days, Yi Shiwen finally had a profound understanding about this Demon Island and why it was famed as the killing fields of peerless geniuses. The Demon Island Bell Summon was not just for Yuan School, but for 10 countries of the Southeast region. Almost over 1,000 peerless geniuses from the 10 countries of the Southeast region were going to participate in this expedition. No one could count how many peerless geniuses fell during the last summons. Qi Fifan himself was an invincible expert of his generation and incomparably tyrannical, and largely because most of the peerless geniuses of his generation had already fallen in the Demon Island. 50 years ago, that time was one of the most miserable times for the Great Yu State. It lost more than 50 peerless geniuses in one fell swoop, and in the end, only Qi Fifan survived and returned from the Demon Island. In the end, what happened there, no one would ever come to know except Qi Fifan. However, even if the situation was relatively good, as many as only a dozen people would manage to come back alive. And one must know that these weren't some ordinary disciples, but were considered the specifically cultivated, peerless geniuses of various forces, the death of any of which would cause severe loss to the sect. It was said in the Southeast region that only those who would manage to come back alive from the Demon Island would be standing on the top of the pyramid of power. Therefore, although the Demon Island was called an elite meat grinder, but it still gave enormous opportunities to the brave young geniuses. That's why even after clearly knowing about the narrow escape, they would still choose to go. Several of them wanted to go because they were holding the thought they would either die on the Demon Island or come back alive to become the strongest figures among the 10 countries of the Southeast region. Moreover, these were the so-called elites among the geniuses and possessed great self-confidence. Every one of them was confident that they would be able to come out alive from the Demon Island. Anyways, there was a huge gap between the strength and skills of those who didn't go to the Demon Island and those who came out from there. So they were willing to take the fall and make good use of this chance. Now it was Yi Zaiwen's turn to choose whether to go or not. I will go. Why wouldn't I go when everyone else is going? And if only one person will come out alive from there, that person would be me. To be continued, dash. Chapter 217, 5th Regular Chapter. Chapter 217. The sinister Demon Island. The Demon Island appeared again and immediately set off a storm in the entire Southeast region. The infamous bell once again summoned countless geniuses from all over, and they set off on the journey. This expedition was only focused on preparing a battlefield for the chosen geniuses hailing from the 10 countries of Southeast region, brave and fearless. But the success was going to belong to only a few. The rest could only be used as paving stones in the supreme glory of the winners. Although it wasn't clear at what time they must go to the Demon Island, but under normal circumstances, the major forces would come along and send their respective chosen geniuses together, so that they could get along on the way and take good care of each other. And this time, 3 disciples were summoned from Yuan School. No one was surprised to find out that one of the chosen candidates was Yi Shiwen, while the other one of the remaining 2 was actually Hua Menghan. In the last 2 months, Hua Menghan had firmly stepped into the second stage of Truth Realm, and her cultivation was surprisingly almost comparable to that of Yi Shiwen. After all, Hua Menghan had spent a long time in Xiantian 9th stage, accumulating all the time, so now when she finally had a breakthrough, she directly reached the second stage of Truth Realm. Initially, Yi Shiwen was a bit surprised, but he knew that she had a strong background. He actually felt quite relieved, since Hua Minghan joined the main sect of Yuan school at the age of 16, and that too when she was at Xiantian 5th stage. And, noticing her excellent talent and shocking cultivation speed, later, she was taken in as a direct disciple of Wu Patian, the head of Yuan school. Now, in just a matter of few years, she reached all the way up to the Truth second stage. This really put her in a league, far ahead of her peers and sibling disciples. Hua Minghan had been considerable low-key all the time since she was focusing on the accumulation of profound knowledge and skill, and now that her cultivation finally had a breakthrough, it literally put her in the spotlight as a peerless genius of Yuan school. Not to forget, she was one of the 3 chosen by the Demon Island Bell. Hua Minghan's achievement could be regarded as extraordinary, literally far beyond the expectations of Yi Shiwen. However, Yi Shiwen was much more curious about the third candidate. He was a young guy in black clothes who appeared to be about 20 years old. Named as Chun Ruochen, he was a sibling disciple of Hua Minghan and had been directly trained by Wu Patian. He was a disciple of True Third Stage and was actually not really a well-known disciple among Wu Potion's disciples. He could only be regarded as very mediocre, with a normally silent and withdrawn personality. He was basically a loner and didn't have many friends. In fact, even Hua Minghan didn't know him well because of his eccentric attitude. Even though Chen Ruochen was not very famous, but Yi Shiwen didn't dare to look down on him. After all, only peerless geniuses could hear the summoning bell of the Demon Island, so it was impossible for mediocre geniuses to be summoned. Perhaps he was deliberately trying to keep a low profile. But anyway, a total of 3 disciples from Yuan school were going to set foot on the Demon Island. So, they would obviously maintain a good relationship with each other. After all, mutual cooperation was not always wrong, because everyone needed to prepare for the long journey ahead, so their departure was delayed until 10 days later, when the 3 finally hit the road. Although each time the Demon Island made its appearance, it was always in the East China Sea, but the location was not the same each time. Besides the experts who heard the summoning bell, others couldn't sense its location. However, to actually find its exact location was not very difficult because thousands of experts were summoned each time, making the task easier. Not to forget, even the non-summoned experts of the same sect would help their chosen peers in finding the Demon Island. However, it was impossible for the non-chosen ones to enter the island. Yi Shiwen and the other 2 flew all the way towards the Demon Island and saw a lot of people on the way. They were also flying in the direction of the East China Sea, where the Demon Island was going to appear after 50 years. Among them, there were many people who didn't believe in this legend and wanted to confirm with their own eyes. Along the way, the 3 didn't have much communication until they reached the East China Sea coast. They started looking for a Zhenyuan-propelled wooden boat. Yi Shiwen noticed that this boat was way faster than the speedboat of his previous life. The trio had an approximate location of the Demon Island, so they decided to advance in that direction. Although flying would be faster than riding that boar, but airspace near the Demon Island was said to be infested with tyrannical flying-type demon beasts, so it was recommended to use a boat. Even though the trio was somewhat dissatisfied with the speed, but they didn't want to take the lead and definitely weren't in a rush. On the way, occasionally, small groups of 3 to 4 experts could be seen rushing towards the Demon Island team. Obviously, they were the leaders of the younger generation among the 10 countries of Southeast region. Early morning sunlight was reflecting on the sea in the form of shiny bits and pieces of dazzling stars. The whole scene looked extremely beautiful as the trio sped on the boat for 3 whole days, but there wasn't a shred of weariness on their faces. Having reached such higher levels of cultivation, there was no necessity of taking rest. From far, they saw a figure approaching very fast from behind, and were actually surprised to see that it was a young priest in black robe. He looked roughly 25 or 26 years old from appeared. His robe was fluttering as he was riding the waves and quickly approaching them. His movements looked natural and elegant. The trio was slightly surprised since they never expected to actually see a priest in the world of martial arts. Yi Shiwen could somehow relate to this from the knowledge of his past life, since the priest somewhat resembled the monastic martial artist from his previous life. However, there were some differences, like the spiritual cultivation involved training one's mind and soul, but this priest seemed to have a very powerful martial arts heritage. This young priest's agility skill was extremely superior. It didn't take him even a moment to arrive beside these three, but he didn't wait to converse with the trio and quickly went ahead. He just stopped for an instant and nodded slightly to greet the three, which showed that he was not an arrogant guy. Hua Minghan frowned while looking at the back profile of the young priest and said, "This priest looks very strong. I could not perceive his cultivation." Chen Ruochen nodded in agreement. This priest was actually daring to go alone to the Demon Island, which was the proof of his incredible courage. There was a calm and dignified look on Yi Zaiwen's face, because unlike the other two, he was well aware of this priest's outstanding strength. He had already seen through the cultivation of the young priest, who was at the 6th stage of Truth Realm. This should clearly place him among the few strongest peerless geniuses on the Demon Island. He was so young and still managed to step into the Truth 6th stage, which was a proof of his natural talent. Needless to say, since the Demon Island appeared only once in 50 years, plus it summoned only special geniuses who were generally only 50 years old or less, each having great potential genius. So, Yi Shiwen could determine from this that this priest was definitely less than 50 years old. In fact, he looked less than 30 years old, which again placed him among the rarest of peerless geniuses like the 8th Prince. Fortunately, the test on the Demon Island was not to determine one winner out of so many contestants. It was more of a treasure hunt. However, the slaughter was inevitable whenever a rare treasure would pop up. Demon Island has been able to attract so many people, all kinds of adventures that Demon Island. There are many day material to treasure. Turn around, you can have great benefits. The main attraction of the Demon Island was it being a host of several rare treasures and adventures. Most people were attracted towards the endless treasures and craze for the upcoming fortuitous encounters. In a blink of an eye, 2 days passed. Yi Shiwen and the other two finally approached the Demon Island. The excitement was getting more and more intense in their hearts as they were nearing the dyed black sky, filled with dark, billowing clouds. The strong winds were howling. Numerous sea waves were billowing and shooting up into the sky, but in this boundless sea, they could still see the blossoming of small waves. When looking from afar, there was an endless sea stretched for miles and obscured by dark clouds. The trio was enjoying beautiful sunlight earlier, but now they were in the deeper region of this sea. Here, dense dark clouds were running amok, obscuring the sky, and a huge island could be seen looming in the stormy waves of Yaoqi, soaring throughout the sky. NT. Yaoqi equals to monkey. The trio knew that this dark cloud was actually composed of Yaoqi, and within a month, the entire Demon Island was going to be sealed off by a barricade of these dark clouds. It would not reopen until more than a year later, which meant that they would be sealed off on this island for a whole year until it would reopen. In more than a year's time, the people on the Demon Island wouldn't be able to contact with the people outside, and vice versa. Under these dark clouds, there was a no-fly zone for any living or non-living thing of alien origin. The trio quickly sped the boat towards the island, while the dark clouds were directly above them. But suddenly from afar, they saw a few human figures coming towards them and were shocked to find out that each of them possessed tyrannical aura. Judging from their auras, it was certain that they were legendary level experts. Finally, the trio saw 3 old men dressed in magnificent robes, as if they were the super heavyweights of some big faction. However, these 3 old men looked extremely distressed. Their robes were ragged and torn all over, as if they were desperately fleeing from someone or something. There wasn't a shred of imposing aura coming from them, as the trio expected from legendary level experts. Roar! A loud roar of unknown origins pierced through the sea breeze and shook Yi Zaiwen's eardrums. It left his ears buzzing and slightly bleeding, which caused him to feel nausea and sick. Yi Shiwen looked in the direction of the sound's origin and saw a huge golden light flying across the sky. Even in the dark and gloomy sky, It looked extraordinarily bright and dazzling. In a matter of few breaths, the golden light arrived close by and dispersed into golden fragments of light, revealing a gigantic golden eagle. Its entire body was covered in yellow feathers that were exuding golden light. It also had a curved black beak and a pair of extremely large yellow claws. To be continued. NT. With this chapter, the 7th volume ends. A new and exciting arc starts from next chapter and is going to last for more than 100 chapters. Stay tuned. Laughing Face. Chapter 218, 6th regular chapter. Chapter 218, Great Ominous Mountain Roar. The huge golden eagle gave out a loud shriek and fled all the way towards the 3 legendary experts. It was extremely fast and arrived in front of them in a blink of an eye and stretched out its huge claws. "Back off, you filthy beast!" One of the 3 old men swayed from side to side to barely avoid the deadly claws. He immediately flew above the golden eagle's head and instantly unleashed his terrifying powers, shooting numerous water arrows towards the golden eagle. The great golden eagle shrieked in a loud voice, instantly lifted its golden wings upward, and in a flash, the innumerable golden feathers on its wings started to glow with golden light. Its golden wings seemed all prepared to welcome the incoming water arrows from above. Boom! 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 The innumerable blue-colored water arrows and dazzling golden feathers scattered everywhere and covered up most of the visible sky. It seemed as if the ambience of the world itself had changed in an instant. The gigantic explosion as if churned the ocean, setting off tremors and ocean waves in all directions. Yi Shiwen immediately dived into the sea when he saw several meters high sea waves coming towards him, along with the aftershock of the explosion. The terrifying might present in the aftershock pushed all 3 of them in random directions into the sea, while their boat was directly shattered to bits. Yi Shiwen took a direct hit, and the huge impact almost made him lose consciousness, but he knew that if he fainted in this damn place, then there would be no saving him. This golden eagle was extremely tyrannical and was literally chasing around legendary level experts as if it was chasing stray dogs. In the end, it was hard to imagine its rank and the level of its cultivation. Yi Shiwen was cursing these old men in his heart. If they knew that they wouldn't be able to escape from the golden eagle, then what did they mess with it in the first place? Each time the 2 sides clashed, it caused a blast so potent that it seemed to have been caused as a result of collision between celestial bodies. The whole sea was boiling and literally burning to the point of vaporizing as a result of terrifying attacks, derived from the fluctuations in the world principles. These fluctuations in world laws were morphing everything on the scene, and Yi Shiwen felt intense pressure, which began to suffocate him on the spot. The protective layer of Zhun Yuan on Yi Ziwen's body was instantly neutralized by the aftermath of the battle, even though it was taking place about 1 li away from there. The terrifying fluctuations in the world laws were almost about to crush Yi Shiwen to death. NT. 1 li equals 0. 5 kilometers. Tianyuan Mirror. Yi Shiwen gave out a loud shout, and Tianyuan Mirror instantly flew out from his body and irradiated rays of scarlet light, forming a protective curtain around him. Only after this, Yi Shiwen finally relaxed and felt a little better. At this time, he looked all around but couldn't find Qin Ruochen and Hua Menghan. Then, suddenly, Yi Shiwen heard a desperate cry and looked up, only to see that the old experts had been firmly clutched in the claws of that golden eagle. Their bodies had been pierced by the horrifying claws, and the blood was endlessly streaming out from their wounds. A bone-chilling sea breeze blew, and the entire area was filled with the smell of blood. How could they possibly survive after being clutched in the fearful claws of that golden eagle? They struggled for a while, but ultimately died. The golden eagle roared and seemed quite self-satisfied. While still clutching the corpses of the 3 old men, it immediately flapped its wings and soon disappeared into the horizon, leaving a long trace of golden light across the sky. When the golden eagle disappeared from there, the sea finally calmed down, although still turbulent because of the usual rough waves. But when compared with the dreadful waves from a while ago, it seemed quite tranquil. After witnessing this scene, Yishiwen suddenly recalled reading about a mysterious bird in the myths and legends. This magical bird was called golden-winged eagle, a legendary giant bird which was famous for taking dragons as its food. He only considered it a ridiculous legend initially, but after witnessing the legendary golden-winged eagle with his own eyes, he couldn't help but held his breath. To think a mythical bird from ancient fables was actually living on this island. This demon island was extremely dangerous, just like a wild forest from ancient times. Not to mention, it was a host to bad weather and all kinds of unusual demon beasts. Yi Shiwen searched for Hua Minghan and Qin Ruochen for a while, but couldn't even find a trace of the two. He could only give up and advanced towards the demon island. He was aware of the fact that Hua Minghan and Qin Ruochen were the experts of Truth Realm and shouldn't have any trouble breathing underwater. He continued the search inside the sea, but was surprised to not see any demon beasts there, even though this part of the sea was supposed to be infested with several kinds of sea beasts. Of course, he didn't dare to approach the dark clouds. Yi Shiwen walked for a day and night in the sea, and finally reached the demon island. The island was completely surrounded by pitch-black clouds. This was a huge island of tens of thousands of miles in radius, floating in the boundless sea, while countless monstrous waves were crashing against it. On the island, Yi Shiwen looked from afar and noticed that this was not so much of an island, but was more of a huge continent. The immense emerald-green forest appeared pleasant to the eye. One could hear loud, beastly roars coming from the woods from time to time. The terminus of the endless forest was actually a towering mountain, which was shrouded in dense fog. One could clearly see that it had a desolate atmosphere, which was continually spreading in all directions. Moreover, precious medicinal plants were present everywhere on the island, including some special herbs for cultivation like several types of ginseng, white fungus, grass fire, and so on. No wonder the Demon Island was so famous and attracted everyone's attention. After all, heavenly treasures and rare herbs were spread everywhere on this island. Yi Shiwen, looking for a place to rest, sat down cross-legged and began to meditate to recover the lost Jin Yuan. In order to resist the aftermath of those attacks, he had almost depleted the reserves of Jin Yuan in his body. At this time, Yi Shiwen wasn't interested in collecting herbs and heavenly treasures because restoring strength was more important to protect himself on this island, more than anything else, and although many of these treasures were important raw materials for medicines, but only for average experts. Considering Yi Zaiwen's cultivation level, these things didn't have any significance. Daytime passed quickly, and the island welcomed nightfall. Roar! Roar! Roars! Numerous roars of unknown origin started to come from the center of the island, where the towering giant mountain was located. The noise from intermittent roars suddenly pulled him out of the meditation state. The fearful sound of roars induced a chilling sensation in Yi Zaiwen's heart. From the time he stepped on the island and came all the way to this place to rest, he saw several demon beasts on the way and was already accustomed to a variety of roars, which simply couldn't affect his concentration. But these horrifying roars that began to arise from that far-off giant mountain after the nightfall actually sent chills down his spine. The roars coming from that giant mountain were similar to the shrieks of a ghost, and definitely didn't seem to belong to a living creature. During the day, the mountain appeared to be shrouded in fog, but during the night, an endless amount of surging dead ki would cover up the entire mountain area and also surge up into the sky, forming dense dark clouds. The usual roaring sounds of various demon beasts would vanish during the nightfall, and for the rest of the night, only the fearful shrieks would continue to transmit throughout the island. The rest of the demon island was always strangely quiet during the night, except the huge mountain, which was the only source of those terrible roars. It's very strange. At this time, Yi Shiwen was standing on a tall tree's branch and looking towards the huge mountain. The silver-colored starlight was sprinkled on his body, making him appear very cold and fierce. Well, that's quite a strong dead ki and resentment, Yimo said. Cannot say how many people must have died to have caused such a dense accumulation of deadki. It's hard to guess the level of this powerhouse, fair to say. It will be very difficult to kill him. But the point is that what in the world happened to have caused such a terrible scene? Yimo muttered. Yi Shiwen looked at the giant mountain, surrounded by an encirclement of deadki, and frowned. This was an extremely terrible scene, because the deadki was condensed to such an extent that it was visible even with the naked eye. The dreadful roars lasted until dawn. When the stars gradually faded away, the roars also died down. After a while, the deadki also dissipated in thin air, as if nothing happened. As the roars from the giant mountain disappeared, roars from all sorts of demon beasts began to resound throughout the island, just like the time when Yi Shiwen stepped on this island a day ago. However, these beastly roars sounded pleasing to the ears when compared with the dreadful shrieks from last night. After a night's rest, Yi Shiwen fully recovered. He was now sure of one thing, that this demon island was several times more dangerous than he imagined. Not only did he need to be careful of the other peerless geniuses, but this mysterious island itself was a terrible threat. So, now was the best time to familiarize himself with a new place and find other people, since Yi Shiwen believed that he was not the only one who stepped on this island. Meanwhile, he also needed to find the whereabouts of Hua Minghan and Chen Ruochen. Yi Shiwen believed in their strengths and knew that surviving shouldn't be a difficult task for them, so he just needed to scout the island and snoop for any news about the two. Although almost 1,000 people would be setting foot on the demon island, but very few would be of average level. The remaining majority of the candidates would turn out to be extraordinary experts, each possessing high cultivation levels. To be continued. NT. Some of the readers asked about MGS's release schedule. Well, I am trying to release 6 regular chapters per week to compensate for the loss of chapters in the last 2 months. Donations, if any, will contribute towards sponsored chapters. I will try to release 1 sponsored chapter as soon as possible, once the donation amount reaches $40. Chapter 219, First Regular Chapter. Chapter 219 God's Descendants. The giant mountain was actually only a part of the vast Sierra, which crossed from the east to west side of the Demon Island. It was hard to see the terminus of the Sierra, although the Demon Island was just an island in this boundless sea, but its size was simply beyond the imagination of an ordinary person. Yi Shiwen was flying through the woods, and suddenly from afar, there came intermittent sounds of bang, 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 one after another, and caused terrifying tremors in the ground. He finally found the source of this noise in the form of large mammoths, which came running from far away, trampling and crushing everything in their path, including some of the great towering trees that might have lived for over a millennia. These mammoths actually looked like giant elephants, and almost each of them was about 30 feet tall, and their whole body was covered in brown hair. The 2 tusks were long, sharp at the tip and curved upward, which made them appear very ominous and dreadful. Almost each and every one of them was at either Truth 5th stage or in Small Truth realm. Although Yi Shiwen had faced several monstrous beasts in the forest, but they all had retreated 3 days' march to give way in the face of Yi Zaiwen's superior strength. But right now, these ominous-looking mammoths were actually pursuing him. NT. Tuebi Sansha. To retreat 3 days' march. Idiom. To give way in the face of superior strength. A strategic withdrawal. Accompanied by a loud shout. A sword in tension fell down from the sky. Puchi. A mammoth was directly cut down. The blood gushed out from the large, gaping wound as it fell down on the ground. Yi Zaiwen's sharp eyes instantly saw a hint of dark golden color, concealed in the dark red blood. There was a faint trace of golden color in the blood, as if a golden thread was mixed in the crimson blood. What? Golden blood? Yimo suddenly exclaimed in an astonished manner. How is this possible? This is the characteristic of a god. So these mammoths are actually God's descendants. God's descendants? What do you mean by that? You mean these mammoths turned out to be an immortal's descendants? Yi Shiwen said in an equally astonished voice. God, the most formidable being among the most powerful creatures in the scope of the heaven and earth, and the most famous of whom was naturally the devil god, who was well known for his endless destructive prowess. The devil god gradually fell from his throne and position, but there were some people who possessed immortality and continued to live for generations. They were incredibly formidable beings and became well known in the 10,000 worlds, where some called them immortal sages and some called them gods. In fact, there was a way to ascertain a god's existence. A formidable immortal being contained golden blood in his veins, and their offspring also held golden blood in their body. But with the passage of time, generation after generation, the golden blood continued to grow thinner. Even so, the gods' descendants possessed a natural talent, and their practice speed was incomparably fast. In the last conversation, Yimo was talking on this topic, but Yishuin didn't pay much attention. After all, he had never heard about God's descendants, and neither did he believe in the existence of a creature called God. Yishuin was from the earth, and unlike most people there who worshiped different gods, he wasn't indulged in God worship because he thought that God was a very formidable being and was simply beyond the comprehension of mere humans. In other words, the ancestors of mammoths actually turned out to be as strong as the immortals? Although he couldn't make a guess as to how many generations had already passed in the bloodline, but he was still shocked that the so-called immortals actually existed in this world. However, at this time, Yishuin didn't have time to ponder about this matter, because just then, he saw the fast-approaching figure of a man far in the horizon. Yishuin took a closer look and saw a man, roughly 30 years old in appearance and dressed in a brilliant warrior's clothing. He was a grandiose-looking man with somewhat rough facial features and a burly body. "Hello, brother." The young man's voice transmitted from afar and fell into Yi Zaiwen's ears, after traveling for miles as a sonic boom. The profoundness of his skill was simply unimaginable. "Hey, brother." Yishuin cupped his hands across his chest and said, "It's rare to see someone coming to this island so early." This man had a matured appearance and appeared very forthright. A jolly man like him would certainly not treat Yishuin as an enemy. Although the Demon Island was called a genius meat grinder, but not everyone was bloodthirsty. It was not a competition where only one person would get out alive. Since on such a dangerous island, one simply couldn't afford to offend everyone. Demon Island was going to stay open for a month, so the participants had a window of 1 month's time to reach the island. After 1 month, the island would close down and would open only after a year. "Great Wu State, Wu Xiaochuan," the man said with a smile. "Great Wu State, Yishuin." Yishuin replied, "You do not mind that I am a person from Great Wu State?" Wu Xiaochuan somewhat accidentally said, although he meant it as a joke, but the fact was that Great Wu State and Great Wu State had a long borderline, and one simply couldn't imagine the number of conflicts they have had for ages. When the state of Great Wu was formed and was relatively young, then Great Wu State had mobilized almost 1 million warriors to attack it. In the war, Great Wu State's founding emperor was seriously injured and ultimately died. Since then, both sides forged a deadly hatred for each other. In fact, Great Wu State was actually the most hated enemy of Great Wu State. "Of course," Yishuin said with a smile. After all, he didn't have a sense of belonging to this country itself. All he cared about was his family and friends. "Haha, good, even I don't care about such bullshit matters about hatred and all. It really tires me to death." Wu Xiaochuan laughed and said, "You are a member of Great Wu State's royal clan, and if you don't care about all that, then why should I?" Yishuin also laughed and said, he could make out that this Wu Xiaochuan was a relatively sincere and jolly person. It was actually rare to find a generous expert like him in this world. Wu Xiaochuan's surname was Wu and was derived from Great Wu State's royal clan, which also indicated that he was actually a royal prince. Although Great Wu State and Great Wu State were mortal enemies, but Yi Zaiwen's knowledge on the topic was quite limited. The time of his stay in this world was fairly short, and since the day he crossed over to this world, he had spent most of his time in practicing martial arts. Owl said, "No matter what nonsense is going on between our countries, it has nothing to do with us, martial artists." Wu Xiaochuan said with a smile. No one knew for how many years There had been a rare, quiet border between the two states, and it was already gradually evolving from hate between countries into a turf war. Yishuan, why are you not together with the people of Great Yu State? Wu Xiaochuan asked. Actually, I arrived here with 2 fellow disciples of a Yuan school, but 2 days ago, we bumped into a golden eagle which was chasing down several legendary level experts. Their battle caused the destruction of our boat, and I was also separated from them. Yishuan said, Did you run into those idiots from Heavenly Rock Faction? Wu Xiaochuan asked. Do you know who they are? Yishuan asked. And Wu Xiaochuan nodded and said, They were part of a rising big influence in our Great Wu State. When they learned about the legend of the Demon Island, they sent a lot of formidable experts to capture the entire island. In the end, the golden-winged eagle killed numerous of their disciples, and only a few old guys were able to escape from the island. But according to what you said, it seems they were chased down by the golden-winged eagle and ultimately perished at its claws. Those idiots were too arrogant. Did they really take the Demon Island's legend as a hoax? They once had a fearful influence, and were confident enough to plan a raid on the Demon Island. But in the end, they all died. And now the weakened faction will soon break up into several small forces. Wu Xiaochuan said with a look of disdain in his eyes. Obviously, he didn't have a favorable impression of them. Since you still haven't found your people, why don't you come and stay with us for the time being? Wu Xiaochuan invited him. Then excuse me. Yishuan was anyway looking for a gathering place for experts. There could be no better place than this to spread the news about Huang Minghan and Chen Ruochen. And perhaps there he might get some information about their whereabouts. Both Yishuan and Wu Xiaochuan traveled for about 100 li and finally reached a big mountain valley, where some warriors were gathered. All of them were truth-level experts, and not just that, most of them were the experts of truth 5th stage or above. However, there were several among them who wouldn't stand a chance against Yi Zaiwen's real strength. Seeing Wu Xiaochuan flying across the sky alongside a youngster in black clothes suddenly attracted the attention of several people. A young man and a young woman walked over to welcome them. This is Lu Yueru, a disciple of Evil Moon Valley. Wu Xiaochuan introduced her to Yishuan. She was a very beautiful woman and dressed in a long yellow skirt. She had a peerless appearance and looked just like a celestial fairy, with beautiful eyes and smooth snow-white skin. That is Xiao Zhen, the strongest disciple of East China Sea's magic sect. Wu Xiaochuan said while pointing at a tall and handsome young man who looked roughly 20 years old. Brother Wu, this man is? Xiao Zhen asked. His name is Yishuan, a disciple from Great Yu State's Yuan school. He got separated from his group, so until he finds them, he will be staying here with us for some time. Wu Xiaochuan replied. Welcome, Xiao Zhen said, but judging from his demeanor and the way he said it, it was quite apparent that he was looking down on Yishuan. After all, on the outside, Yishuan appeared to have recently stepped into the Truth 4th stage. Such a cultivation level was actually considered a big feat among the 10 countries of Southeast region, but now on the Demon Island, it was considered nothing in the presence of strongest geniuses of the younger generation. Only those of the Truth 5th stage or above could command respect on this island. Whether it was Wu Xiaochuan, Xiao Zhen, or Lu Yueru, all of them were the experts with their cultivation above Truth 5th stage and possessed terrifying auras. There was no way their auras was inferior to that of the 8th prince. As far as Xiao Zhen's rude attitude was concerned, Yishuan was not angry or anything. After all, strength was the fundamental law of this world. While facing these gods' favored ones, Yishuan really didn't have the qualification to be arrogant, but he was not discouraged. Their practice time was much more than his, and as long as there was enough time to practice, he would certainly be able to catch up with them, and eventually surpass them. To be continued. Chapter 220, Second Regular Chapter. Chapter 220 Broken Relations. These people were lucky and could be called elites among the peerless geniuses in their respective forces. Otherwise, there was no way to be summoned by Demon Island Bell. Everyone settled here and were waiting for more people to come, but it was only just the beginning. In the coming 10 days' time, more and more people would continue to arrive on the Demon Island. Then, it would truly be the most intense time. After all, besides competing with each other, these experts would have to deal with this mysterious island's environment. However, at least majority of them were not here to battle with others, but just to find various precious heavenly treasures. So there was no need to make enemies here and there. Of course, at some point, they might have to compete over rare treasure, and then if necessary, they wouldn't hesitate to kill. 10 days passed quickly, and during this period, more and more people arrived in this valley, and the number of gathered experts soon reached more than 200. Yishuan did not stay here for a long time. Every time he stayed for some time, then set out in search of Hua Menghan and Shinruochen. And he did not want to stay here for a long time because, to be honest, he didn't want to join their alliance. Yes, 3 days ago, when Yi Shiwen returned from the search, he heard that an alliance had been formed during his absence, and it was made under the leadership of 3 super experts, namely Xiao Zhen, Lu Yueru, and Wu Xiaochuan. The 3 super experts initiated the idea of forming an alliance and received many people's support. After all, if they could have the backing of an alliance, then treasure hunt would be fairly easy and safer. Of course, there were some ambitious people who didn't join the alliance. 3 days later, when he arrived here, things had slightly changed and looked more formal. Even the population had decreased in the valley. Initially, there were 200 experts gathered here, but now merely 60 to 70 people stayed back and probably as part of the alliance. Yishuan occasionally used to come here, but only stayed for a while, then used to leave in a hurry, so he didn't recognize several faces. He didn't even know when they built a small city in the valley. However, considering the magical powers and capabilities of these truth-level experts, building a small city from scratch shouldn't be too difficult. Today, when Yi Shiwen arrived, he saw that a group of warriors had arrived on the Demon Island. The group consisted of 10 men and was led by a tall, skinny man who was clad in leather clothing and had disheveled hair, while there was an unchanging, sinister, and ruthless expression on his face. In front of him, a huge, formidable-looking tiger was crouching on the ground, and its roars were echoing throughout the valley. It seemed like they were waiting for the city gate to open, and there were few guard disciples stationed near the gate, which seemed a bit strange. After some time, the city gate finally opened. When the skinny man saw the gate opening, he lifted his chip up, puffed out his chest, and walked forward. Other members of the group immediately followed after him, and none of them dared to overtake him. However, suddenly, all of them were surprised to see that from the other side, a black figure took the lead and went ahead, meanwhile also overtaking the skinny man in the process. A ruthless look appeared in that skinny man's eyes. He immediately used his mind connection with the tiger and ordered it to attack. A fierce and deafening roar resounded everywhere, and it suddenly transformed into a yellow and black lighting and leapt towards Yi Shiwen from behind, while keeping its big mouth opened as if to bite him to death. The tiger's terrifying power was overflowing at this moment, and whether it was the guard disciples or the followers of the skinny man, all were trembling with fear. They were not strong enough in the face of such a beast, especially since they were mostly the experts of Truth First Stage, Truth Second Stage, or Truth Third Stage at most. This tiger was at least a demon beast of small truth realm, so how could they not feel terror and threat from it? For experts of this age, stepping into the truth realm itself was a great feat. Reaching small truth realm was not something all could achieve at such a young age, except few exceptionally talented disciples like Xiao Zhen and handful of other experts. NT. Truth Fifth Stage Yi Shiwen was suddenly furious at how quick they were to start this inexplicable dispute, but he reacted very fast. He immediately took his long blade and chopped out a terrifying blade light towards the approaching tiger. This blade light was lightning fast, and in a blink of an eye, it rushed out and collided with the demon tiger. Pucci! The huge stature of that demon tiger was directly cut into 2 halves by the blade light, and its blood sprayed out all over the ground. All of the disciples were perplexed because they thought that this would be the end of Yi Shiwen, but never expected that he would turn out to be so powerful. The tiger was a demon beast of small truth realm, but its master was much more terrifying. He was an extremely strong expert of more than small truth realm. And basically, the skinny guy is on the verge of breaking from small truth realm into the truth 6 stage. He has accumulated energy, which makes him stronger than experts of small truth realm. But he has yet to step into truth 6 stage. How is this possible? It was a small truth realm demon tiger and considered a frightening creature in the outer world, but was actually slaughtered in one blade attack. Who is this man, and how is he so formidable? Do you want to die? The tall, skinny powerhouse was furious and was about to attack, but suddenly, the figure of a handsome young man came flying from the valley and landed on the scene. It was none other than Xiao Zhen, but at this time, there was a cold look on his face. Yi Shiwen, are you trying to provoke battling heaven's brotherhood? Xiao Zhen glared at Yi Shiwen and shouted, I am not trying to provoke anyone, and neither do I intend to stir up trouble. If I am not welcome here, then I will leave this instant. Yi Shiwen looked calm, and there was an ever-tranquil expression on his face, but there was anger surging in his heart. This Xiao Zhen didn't even bother to know what happened here, and directly put the blame on him. Yi Ziwen's flaming heart was restless with anger, but he decided not to continue the conflict with Xiao Zhen, since there was a large difference between their levels. First you kill my pet, then you try to run away. Well, it's too late for that. The sinister-looking skinny man said with a ruthless look in his eyes. Do not mess with me, or I'll slaughter you just like I slaughtered your pet. Yi Shiwen narrowed his eyes and fiercely said, Yi Shiwen, how dare you behave so arrogantly? Xiao Zhen once again shouted out loud. Are you blind or what? Cannot you see who really is trying to provoke whom? Yi Shiwen said in an anger-filled voice. Although he was aware of Xiao Zhen's tyrannical strength, but he didn't care. Even if he couldn't beat Xiao Zhen, he could just open his devil wings and get out of here. He was being passive for now because he didn't want to break his relation with Wu Xiaochuan. Therefore, even though he was furious right now, but he was holding himself so as to not completely ruin his relations with battling Heaven's Brotherhood. Immediately, Xiao Zhen felt that his dignity had been challenged while his sword-like fierce eyes were constantly staring at Yi Shiwen. Brother Xiao, I arrived here with people of my tribe at your invitation, and this guy killed my most important partner. Today, if I do not kill him, then it will be difficult to bear the hatred in my heart. The skinny tribal youth's insidious eyes were stubbornly staring at Yi Shiwen. You seem quite eager to die. I'll gladly buy you a ride to hell. Yi Shiwen said in a calm voice, but his cold gaze was as if piercing the skinny man. You're really arrogant. Is this how you want to challenge our battling Heaven's Brotherhood? Xiao Zhen said and looked coldly at Yi Shiwen. If not considering the relationship between this boy and Wu Xiaochuan, then he would have already beheaded this rampant boy. Obviously, this is a matter between him and me. What does this have to do with battling Heaven Brotherhood? It is imperative that you keep on proclaiming the name of battling Heaven's Brotherhood because, in your eyes, it is just a tool to be used for your convenience. Yi Ziwen's accurate words directly hit the mark. Yi Shiwen wasn't afraid of him, and at the worst he would leave this place. After all, his cultivation level was far worse than that of Xiao Zhen, so fighting him was not an option. But that was only for now, because later, the situation might be different. Therefore, he was not afraid of Xiao Zhen. And as far as that skinny youth was concerned, Yi Shiwen was simply not paying attention to him. The skinny man was certainly an extremely formidable powerhouse and was at the peak of small truth, but it was not enough to impress Yi Shiwen. After all, the skinny man's current battle strength was only comparable to Yi Ziwen's battle strength when he used to be on True Third Layer, and now, Yi Shiwen had already broken through to the Truth Fourth Stage. After listening to the words of Yi Shiwen, there was a sudden commotion among the members of Battling Heaven's Brotherhood. Everyone saw what happened there, and they were certainly smart enough to figure out who was at fault here. It was the skinny man who first tried to kill Yi Shiwen, and when Yi Shiwen acted in self-defense, he was actually accused of provoking their brotherhood. Xiao Zhen made an appearance and interfered, but if he had acted alone, nobody would say anything. However, he kept on proclaiming in the name of brotherhood, which was not a right thing to do. Why was he pulling them into this matter for no reason? Indeed, They were now the members of Battling Heaven's Brotherhood, but they joined it just because they were looking for a backing since they were looking for protection. They didn't join the Brotherhood to act as someone's lackeys and be treated as cannon fodder. One must know, even the most ordinary members of Battling Heaven's Brotherhood were actually considered super geniuses at their respective native places. Plus, they were also the center of attraction in their sections. None of them was foolish enough to willingly act as a cannon fodder for someone else's sake. Xiaojun also noticed the commotion among the members of Battling Heaven's Brotherhood, and his complexion suddenly turned unsightly. He immediately looked towards Yi Shiwen, but actually saw that his fierce eyes were full of hostility and killing intention. No one knew what Yi Shiwen was thinking and why he had not yet taken any action. Yi Shiwen did not stay, just turned around and left, but was actually secretly prepared to immediately fight back if someone tried to attack him. But after this matter, he knew one thing, that his relation with Battling Heaven's Brotherhood had completely broken off, even though there was no good relationship between them to begin with. Xiaojun didn't know what to do until Yi Ziwen's figure vanished from there. He didn't do anything to stop Yi Shiwen and let him go, but the killing intention in his eyes was still unabated. To be continued. Chapter 221. Third regular chapter. Chapter 221. Gilded Tyrant form. After breaking off his relations with Battling Heaven's Brotherhood, now Yi Shiwen would need to figure out a new way of finding the whereabouts of Hua Menghan and Qin Ruochen, but he did not regret it. He couldn't stand the other party's rampant attitude and the way they were trying to put blame on him again and again. If Xiaojun was not there, then he would probably have slaughtered the skinny man right on the spot. Yi Shiwen walked toward the depths of the Demon Island and arrived at a seemingly restricted area. This whole area was lush green with towering big, ancient-looking trees, completely obscuring the sky. This Demon Island is too weird. Yi Mo's voice resounded in Yi Ziwen's mind. I have spent so many years following the great Devil King on expeditions, but I have never seen such a strange place. The quantity of lingqi was adequate for the island, and by far more ample than the outside world, but it was a place where demon beasts ran amok. Even at Yi Ziwen's level, he always needed to be cautious, and from time to time, extremely frightening demon beasts would cross from the land or sky. If Yi Ziwen's restraining breath technique was not operating all the time, he simply wouldn't be able to roam around the island without being noticed. Yi Ziwen's gaze fell upon a wreckage located in a far-off place, and he quickly flew over to that place. The entire place had been nearly obscured by towering ancient trees, but he was still able to see a huge white marble-paved plaza at the bottom. A stone structure, placed right between two trees, attracted Yi Ziwen's attention. It should have been a huge stone about 10 meters high. It seemed like the stone structure was cut off and only 1/3 of the original structure remained. He noticed that there were vague, ancient seal characters inscribed on it. He went forward and stretched his hand to wipe off the dirt from the ancient seal characters. Suddenly, at this moment, the ancient seal characters began to glow and the surrounding scenery suddenly transformed. Yi Shiwen suddenly felt his soul hanging in the sky, positioned right above a huge palace. Boom! Boom! Numerous electric snakes could be seen creeping in the black clouds, and a terrifying thunder struck the palace. The palace couldn't withstand the enormous destructive power contained in the thunder strike and crumbled down. I am here. Now come out. Suddenly, a majestic voice resounded in all directions. Buzz! The low and dull muffled sound of a bell resounded, and instantly sent out numerous sonic waves everywhere, while several electric snakes could be seen lurking in the dark cloud, and seemed all prepared to bring down chaos in this world. Get lost! Accompanied by a loud shout, a few 100 feet wide pillar of golden light went straight into the sky and dispersed the dark, thundering clouds. As the voice fell, a middle-aged man flew out of the wreckage of palace and coldly looked towards the sky. He had a dignified bearing and was clad in a golden-colored emperor's robe. In the sky, the scattered clouds suddenly agglutinate again and revealed a huge glowing eye in the center. If you dare to go against the heaven's will, You cannot do that without a fight. A muffled voice echoed everywhere, and a huge lightning maliciously struck down. The scene had a crazy transformation in an instant. Right before Yi Zaiwen's eyes, the golden-robed, middle-aged man suddenly jumped, and a blast of flames spread beneath his feet, as if produced by the terrifying explosion of countless stars. This world is unkind to a myriad of things and treats weak as worthless. If I were to become the god of this world, I will certainly spread the notion of fair and justice and create eternal peace. Yi Shiwen. Yi Mo's loud shout echoed in Yi Zaiwen's mind and forcibly pulled him out of the illusion. Yi Shiwen could not help but held his breath. Just now, he was completely trapped inside the illusion, and if Yi Mo hadn't stopped him, then he probably would have sunk deeper into the illusion, until his soul vanished without a trace. This place was indeed too weird, and at this time, Yi Shiwen was suddenly able to understand what was inscribed on the stone. It was written in esoteric seal characters of some ancient sect, but it was just a guess on his part since there was no proof available. He was still very perplexed after witnessing such a shocking scene inside that illusion. Judging from surging Yaoqi in the sky, it may be because of a mighty demon king's death. What I am trying to say is that this place is the tomb of a demon king. Yi Mo said in a serious tone. Yi Shiwen, maybe this time we have come to a wrong place. If this place is really the tomb of a demon king, then it is absolutely one of the most deadly places between heaven and earth. NT. Yaoqi equals demon qi. Machi equals devil qi. Inqi equals negative qi. Yanqi equals positive qi. Yi Shiwen frowned and said, fortunately, in the past, many people are said to have died in the conquest of the younger generation, but in comparison, not too many people died on the demon island. Maybe, but this place is a natural hunting ground. In the last few days, you have killed so many demon beasts and several among them contain golden thread in their blood, although only a little, but enough to explain that they are immortals' descendants. And guess what? I have a way to extract the god's divinity from their blood. Then you will be able to assimilate it into your body. That should help in upgrading your tyrant body technique and help you achieve the formidable golden body of gods. A supreme body. An incomparably tough flesh, granting you enough strength to tear even the gods to shreds. Yi Mo couldn't hold the excitement surging inside his heart. How could he not when the gods' power was right in front of their eyes? All they needed was to step forward and take it in their grasp. For any god clan, awakening the blood of God was very precious for the children, and once it happened, they were immediately included in the elite training and were also called God's descendants. Not to mention, they were also targeted by enemies quite often. One must know that God clans were all immortals and were rumored to have obtained immortality from the first gods. Perhaps second or third generation of God's descendants was still alive and was considered closest existence to a god and didn't die easily. These old people were extremely tyrannical, capable of bringing chaos to the entire world. So, no one dared to annoy these god clans, not just because they were immortals and extremely tyrannical, but also because they knew ancient martial arts and secret magical techniques. This was common in all of the 10,000 worlds. Seeing God's descendants was difficult, let alone killing them could easily cause a huge uproar and stir controversies. Although the divinity contained in the blood of God's descendants was quite thin and weak, but the quantity was extremely large. Perhaps a year's time should be enough to collect enough divinities to completely practice Gilded Tyrant form. Yi Shiwen had an old monster like Yi Mo on his side to help him. If it was an ordinary expert, then it would be impossible for them to achieve such a thing. But if this year he continued to absorb the divinity of these demon beasts, then gradually his future practice would benefit a lot from this. Perhaps this was the reason why the practice speed was usually faster on the demon island, and this was also one of the important reasons why experts desired to come to this island. Pucci, a demon beast's scaly body, was directly chopped into pieces by Yi Zaiwen's long blade, and its blood gushed out. As he expected, a golden thread was present in the crimson blood. Under the guidance of Yi Mo, he began to absorb the divinity of that demon beast. Yi Shiwen began to mobilize the tyrant body technique within his body, which formed a bronze sheen on his body, making it look strong and tougher than before. Yi Shiwen looked slim, but it was only because of his natural build. No one should make a fatal mistake of underestimating his strength. After fully absorbing the divinity, Yi Shiwen noticed a change occurring in his tyrant body technique. A slight trace of golden color had begun to surface on his bronze skin. All of the gathered silky golden threads completely covered his body, and then only Yi Shiwen finally learned that the gilded tyrant form was a success. An overbearing and tyrannical might as if exploded inside his body, making his already enormous might even more terrifying. After the assimilation of divinity was complete, the golden color of his skin gradually faded and turned back to bronze. Yi Shiwen sighed and said, "This will not do. The divinity of a small truth-level demon beast can only slightly enhance my gilded tyrant form, and the overall progress is not even 1 out of 10,000. Yi Shiwen killed for 1 whole day and night, and he slaughtered only God's descendants. But in the end, the overall progress in gilded tyrant form was accountable to only 5 out of 10,000 parts. At this rate, he would have to kill tens of thousands of God's descendants of small truth realm in order to finish the practice of gilded tyrant form. Perhaps the time period of 1 year was not enough to finish gilded tyrant form, and this was the only chance to finish the practice of gilded tyrant form. After all, he was on the infamous Demon Island, and it was filled with opportunities in the form of God's descendants. If he was unable to complete this technique on the Demon Island, he might not find God's descendants elsewhere, and gilded tyrant form would end up being an unfinished technique. I say we find those mythical demon beasts of beyond the legendary realm, for example, the golden-winged eagle that we saw earlier." Yi Mo said with a smile, "Do you want me to die?" Yi Shiwen frowned and said, "Well, you do not need to go for those formidable beasts when you can always aim for their eggs or cubs. For now, let's start by targeting the young ones." To be continued. Chapter 222. Fourth regular chapter. Chapter 222, World Law Fragment Roar. A demon beast's roar resounded throughout the forest, and the color of the sky suddenly faded when the huge figure of a flame bird flew across the sky. The places it flew over instantly caught fire, and it seemed as if the space itself was melting in its presence. Its dreadful roars were shaking the mountains. Yi Shiwen was hiding amidst a thick patch of grass and felt relieved when he looked towards the furious flame bird, which was, at this moment, flying away towards the horizon. In his arms, he was holding a big round egg almost half his size. This flame bird was a descendant of Phoenix, an ancient god beast. Moreover, it was quite closely related as well. After reaching adulthood, a flame bird easily surmounted the legendary level. Yi Shiwen was greatly relieved and looked at the glowing red egg held gently in his bosom. This was a big harvest. In order to obtain this egg, it could be said that he had a narrow escape. Flame birds were very cautious while taking care of their own egg. Of course, because of the very tight security, most people simply couldn't get close. But since Yi Shiwen relied on the magical properties of restraining breath technique, so he was able to approach the egg and then quietly carry it away. Yi Shiwen found a cave, then gently put down the egg. In the dark cave, the egg was exuding a fiery light. Yi Shiwen did not hesitate to activate Tyrant Body Technique and began to absorb the egg's essence. It could be seen that the flame bird's chick had not yet taken shape inside the egg. From the appearance, it just looked like a vague collection of essence. Bye! Yi Shiwen heard a crisp sound, and a blazing red soul of the flame bird's chick, which flew out of the broken egg, was directly absorbed by him. Yi Ziwen's bronze-colored skin climbed up several levels while there appeared a faint trace of golden color on his skin. After all, Flame Bird was the descendant of an ancient beast and was not very far apart in bloodline. Although he didn't absorb the essence of an adult bird, but the inherent divinity contained in that egg was far beyond what he hoped to obtain by killing those other demon beasts earlier. According to his estimate, if he later killed an adult flame bird then the divinity obtained from its body should be enough to complete the practice of gilded tyrant form in one fell swoop. However, it was an impossible task at his current level, since an adult flame bird was a beast of an entirely different realm, and even legendary level experts didn't stand a chance in front of it. In addition to divinity, there was no small energy contained in the egg, and once all of it was absorbed by him, his inner state slowly began to break. He had spent a long time on the Truth Fourth stage, and even after practicing day and night, there was almost no sign of a breakthrough, but after absorbing the divinity present in the egg's essence, his stubbornly immobile cultivation finally started to break. The next morning, Yishuan finally opened his eyes, and there was an excited look on his face. After a night's time passed, he had finally completely refined the flame bird's egg. His body no longer appeared the same as earlier, and occasionally, traces of golden threads could be seen floating in his eyes. It seemed as if the absorbed golden threads were concentrated in his eyes, and whenever he activated Tyrant Body Technique, his bright golden eyes flashed in the cave. Moreover, as he would continue to absorb divinity more and more, his entire body would be covered with a toughened golden layer. And by that time, when he would thoroughly carry out the gilded tyrant form, then his body would become incomparably tough and fearful. To be precise, the practice of Tyrant Body Technique didn't start in Xiantian realm, but in the early stages of Hodian realm. So, usually, even though the body would become very tough at the end of practice, but the end result was generally completely different from the real thing. Tyrant Body Technique was an ancient martial art and had been created by an ancient tyrant king. It was a fearful technique, and the rumors said that its practitioner could actually slay gods and devils. Although Tyrant Body Technique was an intrepid technique, but Gilded Tyrant Form was its enhanced version, thereby making it even more dreadful. Others certainly didn't dare to randomly make changes to the martial arts left behind by predecessors, especially when Tyrant Body Technique was such a high-handed martial art. But this was not the case for Yishuan. Right after crossing the first layer of Tyrant Body Technique, he began to figure out his own comprehension of the technique. Although he didn't know much about the original thing, but he believed that with the help of mysterious space, he should be able to comprehend this technique. Even though it might not become like the original, it would certainly not be inferior either. Since the beginning of second layer of Tyrant Body Technique, Yishuan began to have his own understanding and developed it in his own way. As a result, its comprehension reached unprecedented proportions, probably even more than that of the Supreme Master who invented it. After all, unlike him, Yishuan had mysterious space which helped him to uncover and patch the loopholes. So, in the end, Yishuan dared to join the rank of gods, and in doing so, he ended up developing his own technique, which he named Gilded Tyrant Form. Gilded Tyrant Form was a tyrannical technique, and when compared to Tyrant Body Technique on the same level, it was much more terrifying. After all, the divine power of gods was used in it. Hence, its Mai was naturally going to be on an entirely different level. Yishuan was confident about his practice thanks to his stock of countless Ling Dawn and Spirit Stones. Compared to the beginning of the practice schedule for Gilded Tyrant Form, Yishuan was more pleased to have finally taken the most important step towards reaching the pinnacle of Truth 5th stage, because his accumulation was really too vigorous, much more vigorous than anyone else. When he was at Truth 3rd stage, his battle strength had reached the peak level of Small Truth Realm, and after the breakthrough to Truth 4th stage, he had once again reached a satisfactory amount of accumulation, almost reaching the point where there should be a shift from quantitative to qualitative change, but there was still the need for a final push. And now with the help of Flame Bird's Egg, the high-level life energy absorbed from it helped Yishuan in finally attaining a qualitative change in his energy, and he crossed the threshold, ultimately stepping into Small Truth Realm. Now, his battle strength was enough to beat the experts of Truth 6th stage. This meant that Yishuan finally entered the ranks of the strongest experts on the Demon Island. Not to forget that this time, almost 1,000 peerless geniuses had set foot on this island. And among them, of course, the experts of Truth 1st stage, 2nd stage, 3rd stage, 4th stage, and 5th stage were in majority. However, the experts of Small Truth Realm were a rare presence. Not to mention there were only 20 to 30 experts of Truth 6th stage and above. Yi Shiwen had tasted the sweetness, and if he was able to complete the gilded tyrant form, then his body would be toughened to what extent no one could predict. However, since he relied on the egg's energy to have a breakthrough, so in the future, it would be difficult to reach the next breakthrough. Later, he would have to continue to accumulate in order to reach the next breakthrough. On this island, besides a terrifying creature like the flame bird, there were several other tyrannical creatures. Not to mention they had cubs or eggs. Basically, they were going to help Yi Shiwen in perfecting gilded tyrant form until he would transform into a fearful golden god. One could imagine the kind of fate those pups were going to suffer. But before Yi Shiwen could think more on this, suddenly, a loud ringing sound of bells began to transmit from a distant place. And along with that, a multicolored light scattered in the sky and enveloped the entire island, in the form of a terrifying enchantment barrier. Ding! Dong! Ding! The intermittent ringing sound of a melodious bell began to resound unceasingly throughout the demon island, and even the demon beasts were excited all of a sudden. Roar! 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 All of the demon beasts throughout the island were excited. They turned their faces towards the sky and began to give out long and loud roars as if trying to respond to the bell's call. The island is closing up, Yemo said, and Yi Shiwen nodded. This also meant that they were about to enter the most brutal phase of fighting and competition on the island. During the year, no one would have any means to contact the outside world. They would have to rely only on themselves. At the same time, everyone would also slowly reveal true nature and get involved in unscrupulous battles. Sooner or later, the conquest for treasures would start. Then things would start to get bloodier and brutal. Everyone on the island was still immersed in the colorful rays of light when the ringing bells sealed the island. And a rumor immediately swept across the island. Apparently, some people found world law fragment within a sierra. Suddenly, this caused a sensation throughout the demon island. Perhaps experts of Xiantian realm might not know the significance of a law fragment, but that was not true for truth-level experts, especially not for the super-genius experts summoned on this island. Regardless of what level of pious life a person had led, they must come in contact of world laws to progress further. World laws and principles were more like the essence of everything between the heaven and the earth. In order to practice further, one must grasp the essence of world laws. This was also the only way to step into the legendary realm. There was no other way because the so-called truth realm was only a platform where one needed to prepare themselves for understanding the world laws. Legendary realm experts were actually the tyrannical experts who were able to comprehend world laws to a certain extent. Although the truth-level experts also comprehended world laws, but only to a very small extent. And it was only sufficient to help them rank up within the truth realm, but not enough to step into the legendary realm. The so-called half-step legendary experts could vaguely touch the world laws, but weren't able to fully touch. That's why they were still in a vague muddle-like realm and unable to step into the legendary realm. Just by relying on one's own insight, even peerless geniuses would find it extremely difficult and time-taking to comprehend world laws, which was the reason why there were several hundred true disciples in a Yuan school, but only a handful of legendary experts. To be continued. That you're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.